Okay, good evening and welcome back to the public portion of the regular council meeting for April 15th, 2020. We're going back in public at 7:23. For people who are watching online, I'd like to apologize for the delay. We're trying different video systems to try to make sure that it can work properly, and hopefully it will work. So we have no presentations or recognitions, and we are on item 5, Applications 5.1, Darren Adamson, Avail LLP Chartered Professional Accountants. So, Darren, did you want to start us off?
Sure, absolutely. So I had a chance to go through the financial statements and indicated the financial condition with the audit committee earlier, and we went through it in good detail. So I'm thinking for council, I will go into a little less detail, but if you have any questions, of course, let me know and I will do my best to answer. I can share my screen. Okay, I'm not sure which screen. Can you see the financial statements over here?
Consolidated? Yes.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure if you could see both screens or just the one. So, okay, so here's our audited financial statements that are still draft until they're approved by council, of course. Assuming that they're approved today, our auditor's report is our 2-page auditor's report. It's dated today. This is the new standard auditor's report that we had last year for the first time. It's a standard report. Our opinion is at the top now, and our opinion is that these financial statements do fairly present the results of operations of the town. It gives more details on the basis of our opinion, the responsibilities of management and those charged with governance, the auditor's responsibilities. I know that you can all read, so I won't go through all that. But the important part is that it's a clean auditor's opinion. Management report is a requirement under public sector accounting standards that management signs off on the financial statements as well. So this is a consistent report with previous years as well. So I won't spend any time on that. Getting into the actual financial statements. So here we have the consolidated statement of financial position as of December 31st, 2019 compared to 2018. At the top, we have financial assets, being cash or anything that's cash equivalent or will be converted to cash or used up in the next fiscal year. It's 22.3 million, very comparable to last year's 22.2 million. From there, we move down, we take out our liabilities, or the amount that's owed at the end of December, which is 26.2 million, to come down to a subtotal net financial debt. Previously, it was net financial assets. We continue moving down, add in our non-financial assets, which are non-financial, so they're non-cash. Most of that is tangible capital assets, and that reconciles down to total accumulated surplus. So our accumulated surplus in total has gone up a little under 2 million. We'll see on the next page that we had a surplus of just under 2 million. Some of the highlights that I skipped over, under financial assets, there's not a whole lot of changes. We did move some investments into cash, spent some of it on capital assets, but overall our financial assets are very comparable. The big change in liabilities is in long-term debt. So during the year, 8.9 million almost was taken out of new debentures, and then about 954,000 was repaid. So the one big change on this page is long-term debt, and that's gone up. Payables are down a little bit. There were more holdbacks payable in previous years for the field house project. So that gets us to our net financial debt or net financial asset position. So that's decreased by about 5.6 million. And the reason that happened is because that was all invested into the tangible capital assets. So you can see tangible capital assets went up by about 7.3 million from 199 million to 206. So we've taken some of our financial asset position and moved it down into non-financial assets. During the year, we had around 12.5 million of additions of tangible capital assets. Some of the bigger projects were the town hall, Strathmore Commons, and a whole host of smaller projects, including land improvements, building, engineered structures, a whole lot of them. And it also includes contributed assets of about 3.7 million, which are, the biggest portion of that is for the Lakewood lift station, which is about 3.2 million. So overall, the biggest change is our capital assets went up significantly, where our liabilities also went up by a significant amount, and our accumulated surplus is up by about a little under 2 million. The breakdown of the accumulated surplus is important to note, so I will go to note 9 in a minute, and we'll see the breakdown of that. Page 5 is a statement of operations. So this shows us how we did for the year ended December 31st. Operating revenues at the top total 28.5, almost 28.6 million this year, up a little over 1.1 million from last year. The two top lines have both increased over the previous year. Property taxes are up, and they were budgeted to be up, so we knew they would be up. And then user fees and sales of goods is up. There was more utility charges, and also franchise fees went up as well. So other revenue line items are mostly comparable to the previous year. So overall, we're up about 1.1 million. Our expenses increased by almost 2.5 million. And a lot of that shows under the administration line, but a lot of it shows in various lines. Most of it is due to increased salary and wages and increased contract services. So during the year, there were approximately 25 new full-time equivalent positions, at least for part of the year. So salaries and wages went up significantly because of additional positions. And then also a 2% cost of living adjustment and a 2.5% grid movement as well. So salaries and wages went up higher than usual because of those reasons. So our expenses then are up 2.5 million. So our subtotal here, deficiency of revenue over expenses before other, we have a deficiency from operations of about 5.5 million, which is not that far off of the budget of 4.7 million. And just as a reminder, this does include amortization expense, non-cash expense of about 5.1 million. So if we excluded that, we'd be closer to a break even. From that number, we move down and we add in our capital grants and our contributed assets. So out of our total $12.5 million of tangible capital asset additions this year, 3.7 million were contributed and 3.7 were funded by capital grants. So 7.5 million was funded. The other roughly 5 million was funded either through the debt proceeds that we had, or some of it was funded through reserve. So bottom line, this year we had a surplus of 1.9 million compared to last year's surplus of 5.8 million. I don't know if maybe I'll stop there and just see if anybody has any questions or comments on either of those two pages. Those are the two pages that have the most information, probably the two most important pages.
Any questions, councillors, so far?
I have a question, and it might be in there. I just might not have seen it, Your Worship.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for the percentage of, and perhaps that might be an L question, but the percentage of cost spent on salary, percentage of total on salary.
Yeah, I can show you that. That's in the notes.
I'm working off screens, Darren, so
Yeah, no problem. So note 14 shows the expenses by object.
14.
The same 34 million of expenses. So that's on page 15. Just broken down by object. So salaries and wages are 12.2 million out of the total 34.1. So roughly a little under a third.
Thank you.
A little over a third.
Well, it's still in that 36 percentile.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
That's okay. I got it.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Any other questions from councillors so far?
May I ask a question, Darren? Are we supposed to be able to, for the purposes of sharing this with with the public, be able to see what you're referencing on the screen?
Yes, can you not see my
I can see the cover page. As you were going through the report, I was looking at my own personal paper copy, but I was wondering if you're able to put it up on the Zoom screen, please.
I thought I did.
We have
The
the
cover page.
I asked if you could see it and you said yes. So are you looking at this one over here? Can you, okay, I think you're looking at, is that better?
Cover page, yeah. Oh,
There you go.
Oh,
Now I
okay.
can see it.
I thought I was sharing the other screen, so I apologize for that. Yeah, so we did go through. I was pointing things out as I went on pages 4 and 5. So sorry for that.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for pointing that out.
Howard?
Sorry.
Oh, I was just thanking Councillor Bauer for that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Couple of the other, so some of these other statements or pages are, there's some good information in there, but it's really a lot of detail that is probably more, if you're interested in something specific, it's probably more, like for tonight, I want to just kind of keep it high level. So I'll skip over some of these pages. Net debt page, we've already looked at the bottom line net debt and we've talked about that. So this shows how it changed from beginning of the year to the end of the year. Page 7 shows the statement of cash flows. Important parts here are, I think, cash flows provided by operations is positive this year, and it was positive the previous year. So that's always a good thing. You want to have positive cash flows from operations. Shows that you spend $8.5 million on capital, funded that largely through debt and a little bit through investment, and have a solid cash position at the end of the year. Then we have quite a few pages of notes. Note 1 is the accounting policies. None of the policies have changed this year. They're all the same policies as last year. We have some other notes that gives more details of specific account balances, which for the most part, I think are fairly self-explanatory. So I won't go through each note. But one note that I think is important to look through is accumulated surplus. So note 9. This shows out of our total 200 and roughly 3 million of total accumulated surplus, 193 million of that is equity intangible capital assets. So the money's already been spent and is sitting in the infrastructure, buildings, equipment, everything that the town owes as far as tangible capital assets. So the money's been spent, but we still have the assets. The other 9.3 million roughly is available for future spending. So when we look at that on an annual budget of 30 million-ish, we're not quite a third of the year of expenses. So it's not an excessive amount, and it has gone down over the last few years as the town has invested significantly in the tangible capital asset pool. So I always think this is an important note to know the breakdown. Sure, we've got a $202 million surplus, but 193 million of that has already been invested in capital assets. Couple other notes. We have our reserves note. So out of our total accumulated surplus, 9.2 million is sitting in reserves so it's been set aside for specific purposes. And you can see what those specific purposes are in note 10. The biggest change is in the financial stabilization reserve, and that was drawn down this year for a number of reasons. About 900,000 plus was spent on, or closer to $1 million was spent on capital projects. A whole host of capital projects. Another 537,000 was allocated to or transferred back to unallocated surplus, and then there was various other operating projects as well. So the biggest change on the reserves is the financial stabilization reserve was drawn down. I don't want to go through each of the notes, but if you have any specific questions, I will certainly do that. One note I did want to highlight, though, is debt limits. So each year, based on the amount of revenue that the town has, we calculate the debt limit that you're allowed to borrow up to the maximum without getting any additional approval from the minister. So your debt limit is almost 43 million. even though we took on significant new debt this year, we still have almost 24 million of unused debt capacity. So we're not anywhere near the limits there, so that's good. We have some other required disclosures. We do have a note 18 that we added this year, just surrounding the whole COVID-19 issue. As we know, the situation is changing rapidly. The town is, I'm assuming, dealing with it on a daily basis as well. Probably doing things such as deferring or forgiving interest charges on certain account balances, delaying collection of certain charges, and you know what you do with your taxes. So it's going to affect cash flows for sure. We don't know how much it's going to affect overall bottom line. So I won't read this to you, but basically the situation is changing rapidly, and the future impact on the town is not readily determinable at this time. So it's not news to anybody that that's a big issue, but we still need to highlight it in there. And then we have 3 schedules. One of them just shows the changes in accumulated surplus. So we've already looked at these bottom line numbers. If you want to see the details of how they changed, that's there for you. Tangible capital assets note shows the cost. The top third here, or top half, is the cost of the tangible capital assets. Beginning of the year, our additions, a little bit of disposals, so cost at end of the year. And then we have accumulated amortization. So we amortize the capital assets over their expected useful life. So we've expensed or amortized about 67 million of the total 273 million. So we have about 206 million remaining. And if you took the percentage of 206, we had about 273, about 75%, which would tell us that on average, the capital asset pool has an estimated 75% useful life. So that's a really good position compared to most municipalities that I see. So the town has invested a lot in its capital asset pool over the last number of years. And then the last schedule, or the last page, is segmented disclosure. So it gives us the same numbers broken down in even more detail by the different segments. For today, I don't want to go through that much level of detail, but if you are wondering about a particular segment, you can see some of the details there. So that's what I thought were the highlights. But again, if there's any, I'd open up to questions or comments.
Any of the councillors have questions?
I do.
Councillor Peterson?
Okay, so I'm still hung up on the whole staffing thing. So to give me an idea, so I think you said we hired, there have been 25 new hires in this year, or FTE.
Yes.
And that there had been a significant increase, and I'm looking on page 15, I think, and then again on page 27 under expenses. Looking at the year-over-year difference, I guess that's just what I want to be assured of, on what the difference is year-over-year from 2018 to 2019.
Yeah, so overall, if you're looking at note 14 on page 15, I'm not sure on the page numbering. I don't have it. Mine only go up to page 21, so I'm not sure what other page you were looking at. But on page 15, note 14 shows salary, wages, and benefits in total went up to 12.2 million from 10.6, so up about 1.6 million, roughly, a little bit over, which was about 15%, which again is
That's what I'm looking for. Thank you.
That's more than usual, but that's why it's all the new positions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from councillors?
I do, if I may.
Corville? Or sorry, Deputy Mayor Corville?
I asked Aaron earlier and he'd sent me an email. I wanted to actually know the specific items. Like, I'm sure that I could probably go back, but when I looked at the financial stabilization, I was wanting to know what we had, I guess, approved for all of those differences. I was actually just looking for a more specific list than what you'd given me, Darren. Is that possible? Maybe you can know?
like I said, there was about 23 different projects for capital. So I didn't know if you wanted, how much detail you wanted.
Not a lot of detail, just even a quick reference that would jog my memory.
Okay, I'm just going to pull that up here.
It doesn't have to be done right now, neither.
Okay. Okay, I can send you another email with more details.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other councillors? I'm not hearing anything, so is someone prepared with a motion?
Your worship,
Councillor Peterson?
I would move the council accept the 2019 audited financial statement, the management letter, indicators of financial condition as presented by Mr. Darren Adamson of Avail LLP Chartered Professional Accountants, and authorize 2 members of council to sign, or our audit committee to sign our internal audit committee to sign the financial statements.
Thank you for that motion. Now that we have a motion on the floor, is there any discussion on that motion? And I think for voting, I'll go alphabetically so it's a clear vote for everyone to see at home. So
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Corbeil,
Aye.
Councillor Montgomery,
Aye.
Councillor Cox, sorry,
Aye.
Councillor Peterson,
Aye.
Councillor Sobel,
Aye.
and I am an aye, so that motion has passed. Thank you, Darren, for your work and your presentation tonight.
You're certainly welcome. I'm not sure if you wanted me to spend a couple minutes on the indicators of financial condition, or if you want to just leave that for information.
Council, what do you think?
I wouldn't mind a little overview. I'm just sitting here looking at it. It's kind of interesting.
Okay.
Okay.
So can you see my screen still, or is it says my screen sharing is paused?
I'm looking at a secondary screen, so.
Is that,
I have the scheduled consolidated financial statements.
yeah, so when I go resume share, it comes up that. Oh, there, is that better?
No, we still don't have the indicators up yet. No.
Now I'm confused because I was on the other screen before, and now maybe if I try again.
We have many screens. Oh, there's Darren.
There we go.
There it
Okay.
is.
There you go. Thank you.
Good stuff. I'm still learning this. I thought I had it figured out, but I'm still learning it. So, so here's the indicators of financial condition. I'd probably just flip to the very last page to start, and we'll see a number of graphs. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll give you a feel for how they work. So what we've done is we've downloaded a bunch of information from all the municipalities in Alberta from Alberta Municipal Affairs website, and we've created a bunch of indicators of financial condition that shows in a 5-year graph. And we're comparing the town to a few different comparisons. One is comparables of same type, so plus or minus population of 25%, and the town. So there's only 5 of you in that. So we'll take that line with a little grain of salt, but that's the green line. And the comparables any type, so there's 3 of those in Alberta that are within that population zone. Those include counties, MDs, that kind of thing. And then there's any type as well. So that would include all municipalities. So we have 3 different or 4 different categories. One is sustainability indicators. So how sustainable are the town's operations? We have 2 graphs here that compare your assets to liabilities, and the second one compares your financial assets to liabilities. And the score has gone down a little bit on each because we've taken out another almost 9 million of long-term debt this year. So we're still above average on our assets to liabilities. We compare better than all the other graphs. And we're a little bit lower on financial assets because we have taken on that additional long-term debt this year.
Is that alarming to you, Darren? The financial assets to liabilities?
No, because basically, I mean, when we looked at the financial statements and we looked at the statement of financial position, even though we're in a small net debt position of, what was it, $3 million or so, I kind of, it's almost 4 million. I kind of consider that to be similar to like a mortgage on a home. So if I go out and buy a home and it's a $200,000 home and I end up having to take $150,000 mortgage on it, that's basically the position you're in, is you have a $4 million mortgage on a $202 million home or asset base. So it's a very small amount. So to me, it's not concerning. If the trend of it was to continue that way over the long term, and you ended up not having any reserves or any spendable surplus, then I would say it would be concerned.
So this is where we take note that we need to have to start focusing on our reserves.
Yeah.
Sorry, Your Worship, for interrupting.
Oh, no, that's good. Thank you.
May I also just piggyback on that, please, Your Worship?
Yes, Councillor Bauer.
I would like to just ask, in light of what's happening with COVID, it looks like we're really going to have to be looking at future infrastructure projects and putting some money out in order to get some people working. What should we be really watching going forward in the next 6 to 12 months in terms of our sustainability and our future vulnerability as well?
I mean, obviously, that's not my expertise. My expertise is on financial statements. But from what I've seen and what I know is you're going to want to look at your costs, obviously. First, you're going to look at your revenues and see what you think might change. I think revenues will probably decrease, if anything, as people can't pay their bills. So you might have some more bad debts. The town does have recourse against a lot of that. So who knows how much that'll affect you. But what you can really control probably is some of your variable costs. Staffing is a huge cost. And so the decisions will have to be made, perhaps tough decisions on who stays on and who doesn't, as depending on what's needed. There's a whole lot of work, obviously, that would go into that, and I don't have any of the details, of course. But I mean, looking at your costs, the costs that you can control, and probably making some tough decisions in the short term. Hopefully, it doesn't last that long. But again, as the note said, it's too early to tell. We really don't know how long this is going to last or how much it's going to affect us. So, sorry, I don't really have a solid answer on that, but.
No, I really appreciate you answering. I realize that this isn't your wheelhouse of expertise. However, what I would like to know is just how many are we able to tell from this graph? Well, I can tell that we're very close to reaching the point where we're more closely aligned with other municipalities that have similar populations, whereas before it looked like we were in a better position. And so I think that just means that we need to approach anything that we do in the future with a lot of caution, like Councillor Peterson said.
Yeah, and one thing too I would caution or just remind is each single graph doesn't really tell. It only tells a small portion of the picture. You kind of got to look at all the graphs together to really get a good feel for the condition of the town. So this top one here it includes all your tangible capital assets, and we know that the town has a strong tangible capital asset balance base. And so overall, asset-wise, you're doing great. Financial asset-wise, we've spent a lot of our financial assets and invested in the tangible capital assets. So that's why this one shows this downward trend. But it's still not in a concern area yet. It could be trending that way if that continued. But so that's something that I'm sure administration and council is looking into and planning over the next year or two to make sure that any additional capital projects that you have on the go are managed.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So a couple of the other graphs, I won't go through them all. So this one here is operating expenses compared to the taxable assessment. So here we can see our operating expenses each year range around 26 million up to a high of 34 million this year. And what we're doing is we're comparing that to the taxable assessment. Each year, all the properties in the town gets assessed as to their value by your assessor. And that's what we're using as our approximation of the overall economy. So if this blue line, which is Strathmore, if it was totally flat, that would mean your expenses are exactly in line with our approximation of the economy. It is pretty flat. It might be slightly upward, which would indicate that your expenses are increasing faster than the economy. Like I say, it's just an approximation of the overall economy. We don't really have a better indicator right at this point, but basically I think when I look at this, it's pretty flat. If anything, it's slightly upward. If it was steeply upward, I would be concerned, obviously. So then some other indicators, we have flexibility indicators, which means how nimble is the town able to respond to uncertainties and to new things that come to light. So one of them is, these two graphs both sort of tell the same thing, and they're centered around how much debt do you have. So this one is comparing your total debt to the revenue. So this year we took on additional debt. Last year was 11 million. Now we're up to almost 19 million. And our total revenues are roughly the same or down slightly. So our percentage of debt compared to revenue has sharply increased because we took on that new debt. I might be concerned about that if that again was continuing on. But when we looked at the notes, I think it was note 25, note 15, we still have significant unused debt capacity if it's needed. So we're not anywhere near approaching our debt limits. And like I said, our net debt position, now that it's about 4 million, we are in a net debt position, but it's not to a concerning level, at least in my mind. This graph here shows our net book value compared to the cost of the tangible capital assets. When we looked at the financial statements on Schedule 2, I said the town's capital asset position is really good compared to your comparatives. And you can see here, your useful life of your tangible capital asset pool favors or compares very favorably to other municipalities. The one I want to look at here more is the infrastructure investment. So here we're looking at the tangible capital asset additions each year over the 5-year period compared to amortization expense. So amortization is our approximation of the amount of usage of the tangible capital assets. So over the long term, you're going to want to make sure that you reinvest in your capital asset pool at least as much as the accumulated amortization. So if you reinvest exactly the same as amortization, your net book value will stay exactly the same. In fact, what's happened over the last 5 years is you've invested 46 million in your capital asset pool. Amortization's been 24 million, so you've reinvested over 22 million into your capital asset pool, while at the same time our reserves went down 9 million. So we've funded a lot of that through operations or through capital grants, but a lot of investment has gone into the tangible capital asset pool in recent years, probably more so than the long-term average is, and will more so than I think what the next number of years will be once you get past your next couple of big projects, being the town hall and the commons projects. I think I just mentioned that you have, so this one here, accumulated surplus available for future use. So this is, again, when we looked at note 9, I kind of talked about this a little bit, but basically if you take your restricted reserve or your reserves and your unrestricted net assets, you get total accumulated surplus that's available for future use. 4 years ago or 5 years ago, that was 18.5 million. Now it's down to 9.4 million. So this has gone down about 9 million. But at the same time, your capital asset pool has gone up 22 million. So we know why it's gone down, but we also know that obviously that's not sustainable for the next 5 years at the same rate, or you'd be basically down to almost zero of spendable surplus. So those are the ones I wanted to cover. There's a few other ones in there that I think you probably want to go through and look at, but those are the ones I thought were most important.
Okay, thank you very much, Darren.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions from council?
Your worship, I would just like to thank Mr. Adamson and his company for this audit. And then just to also point out that on page 38 of the report, he also thanked Val, Mel, and the rest of the administrative staff for their assistance during the audit. And I would also like to pass on council's thanks as well.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Bauer. Anything else, council? Okay, thank you. And again, thank you, Darren, for your report and for presenting this unique way for us tonight.
You're certainly welcome.
And have a great evening. Stay safe and healthy.
I will. And then I'll just add, thank you for Councillor Bauer for thanking everyone. I was going to do that, but just once it's approved, then what we've been doing recently with the COVID situation is we can send electronic forms to whoever needs to sign, and it'll come back to my assistant, and she'll put it all together as one signed document that's acceptable to the government, and we'll get it all signed that way. So we don't have to wait for the mail. We can't get together. We can get it signed electronically. So your worship and with other councillors will be signing. But we can expect an email in the next probably couple of days, I think, from Rhonda, my assistant, and get it all signed up that way and up to municipal affairs.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, council and public who are watching, that brings us to item 6, consent agenda. I don't believe we have anything there. We move on to item 7, confirmation of minutes. 7.1, adoption of the April 1st, 2020 regular council meeting minutes.
Your worship, Councillor Corbeil.
Deputy Mayor Corbeil, yes.
I move the council adopt the April 1st, 2020 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you for that motion, and I'll go alphabetically again. Councillor Bauer.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Corbeil.
Aye.
Councillor Cox, sorry.
Okay.
Councillor Montgomery.
Aye.
Councillor Peterson.
Aye.
Councillor Sobel.
Aye.
And I am an aye, so that is passed. We have no tabled items, and now we move on to item 9, items or reports from administration. 9.1, proclamation of the Emergency Management Week, May 3rd to 9th, 2020, which is on page 46 of your agenda.
Did you want
Sorry, I couldn't hear that one.
a motion?
Yes, please.
I move the council declare May 3rd, May 9th, 2020 emergency week.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Cox. You've all heard the motion. Any discussion on that?
Your worship, it's pretty obvious, but I think it's really important that we recognize this as being so important. We've been using these people for the last couple of months to prepare for this pandemic, and they're doing an amazing job. And it just seems very fitting at this time to recognize them for the amazing work that they do. So our lives are in their hands. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sobel. So I'll go to each of you for your votes again.
May I make an amendment, please? I noticed that on the proclamation, it says Emergency Preparedness Week, and then in the motion, it says Emergency Management Week. May we just call it Emergency Preparedness Week, please?
Okay, so, okay, sorry.
You need me to amend that motion?
Yes, please.
I guess I'm confused, Councillor Bauer. Mine says Emergency Management Week. Oh, Emergency
And then,
Week. Okay, yeah, all right, thank you. So Deputy Mayor Corbeil, are you comfortable with that friendly amendment?
Yes, your worship.
Okay, so we have an
Cox.
motion.
It was Cox.
Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Cox, sorry. Are you comfortable with that friendly amendment?
Yes, worship.
you. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor as amended. Councillor Bauer, are you in favor?
Aye.
Councillor Cox,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Corbeil,
Aye.
Councillor Montgomery,
Aye.
Councillor Peterson,
Aye.
and Councillor Sobel,
Aye.
and I am an aye, so that has passed. Thank you very much, everyone. That brings us to item 9.2, Strathmore Solar Deployment, page 28. And James, are you speaking to this, or is Ryan Roycroft?
Oh, sorry, Your Worship. I actually hope Mr. David is on the line. I'm hoping he is and realizes that he might be muted and is ready to present.
Good evening, everyone. Can everybody hear me?
Sure can, Dave.
Yes.
Okay. Reporting from the fishbowl. Thank you for your time this evening. So I'm just going to pull up the report here and we'll get started.
Okay. Thank you, David.
So first of all, thanks to Council for allowing me the opportunity to present tonight. We've got an exciting opportunity here once again. Really, my intent for this evening is not to belabor the details within the report. What I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize what I see as the highlights working through this in effort to try to get approval and to get some direction on which partner, subject to that approval, that you're interested in moving forward with. And with that, I'll just start with, kind of the project evolution, which is available right on the first page of the report. And really just a few points there. First of all, administration has been working on town-sponsored solar deployment for some time now. We've got actually seven different projects, what I'll call, that are all economically viable. Most of that economic viability is due to grant funding that's available at this time. And that grant funding is slowly shrinking. So given subscribed interest in the program, and I'm specifically referencing the ASNP or the MCC-AC grant funding that's out there, what administration decided to do is really just to target its best project to take advantage of remaining funding to make sure that the town didn't miss out on an amazing opportunity to have a huge share of that cost funded by that program. So that's the first comment. The second comment here is that one of the projects that are included in those seven projects are the Aquatic Center. So the Aquatic Center is part of the discussion that we're having right now with the Golden High School, or the Golden Hills High School Division. I'm in contact with Mark Schweitzer over there. I've actually been in to present to his group at the high school to talk about the amazing things that they're doing over there. We are in contact with them. We're engaged with them at this time. It requires a bit more work though, and there's some unique aspects of that project, which we'll come back to council with at a future date. But just know that we are engaged with them. We are aware they're on our radar, and we are working with them. That's really the second point that I'd like to make from a historical standpoint. Moving on, just getting into kind of what we're looking at. We had NMAX come through a while back to deliver a kind of presentation on some of the viable projects that we were talking about. So we have two great options in front of us right now. Now, what we're talking about here is an 88 kilowatt system that's going to be positioned on the rooftop of the new town hall. And like I said, NMAX was very much part of the mix because of their unique financing alternative that's out there. Most recently, we were contacted by another company called Skyfire, who was well renowned in the industry and has been vetted by the people I talk to about solar. Most recently, they engaged with us as well and really came to us with a late game kind of offer that matched what NMAX was talking about, both in terms of system design and the turnkey system and the available warranties, et cetera. And really, in a very short amount of time, put forward an effort to say, hey, listen, we want to be part of this discussion. And we have something different to offer here. So the two options that you have in front of you right now are stated within the report. Some of the highlights that I'd like to comment on is that obviously these are apples to apples. We have a turnkey system for both. We have modules and inverters warranted for 25 years, and we have maintenance warranty on the system itself for 15. And that's applicable for both partners that are tabled here. Those include the remote monitoring so that we can communicate and market the benefit and the innovation that the town is taking on by tackling this type of project. And the rest of that is just, or the rest of the documentation included in that project parameters section just speaks to the cost. So we have NMAX coming in at $187,000. We have Skyfire coming in at $144,000. And then once you net the grant funding from those two, you're looking at a cost of $109,000 for NMAX and $78,000 for Skyfire. So the cost of the projects themselves heavily discounted by the MCCAC grant funding or proposed grant funding to the tune of anywhere from 40 to 51%, depending on what option we're at. The biggest takeaway I want to take from here is that when we started down the road on solar, and I was educating myself about the market, when you look at kind of, you know, a reasonable kind of deployment cost per watt, the messaging I was received that anywhere in that $1.50 to $2 range, you're right in the sweet spot of, you know, what you should be expecting to pay. Now, we are in a very beneficial situation here where we have two offers, one at $1.24 per watt as far as NMAX is concerned, and 89 cents per watt for Skyfire. So really, either one of those options fall even lower than kind of what that sweet spot was that we were talking about. And like I said, the scrutiny that I applied to them and the diligence we applied to their financials, you know, makes me very, very comfortable with sharing these offers from them with you at that time. So moving into the next session in terms of, you know, what the proposed funding sources are, I won't go through the details of the fund in terms of what that looks like, but really it's a tandem approach to financing this. Obviously, a large portion of that would be funded by the ASMP funding that's referenced here. And depending on successfully getting that option, we also benefit from what they're calling a first-time project bonus, where, you know, that's why we're seeing the cost per watt being so low right now. And what that looks like is that we're talking about, you know, up to $250,000. It wouldn't be that in this case, but really it ties back to 25 cents, an additional 25 cents per watt, which is why the project itself is so attractive when you start looking at this. Now, moving into the second part of that financing, really it comes down to two options. NMAX's unique financing option, which I referenced previously, has a 15-year term. It's funded at a 3% funding cost and has an annual capital service. So annually, we will be paying roughly $9,000 to have this amazing solar deployment on our roof. When compared to Skyfire's, your Skyfire's option is a debt-funded option, so the town would be drawing down on its balance sheet, albeit in a way that's ultimately economically viable. So it's not as if we're just taking on debt for the sake of debt. We're actually investing in a project here that has a rate of return, which is exciting, or which is positive, at least from a financially minded person. Difference there is that you have cheaper financing costs at 2.51%, 521%, and you're looking at an annual capital service cost there of $6,300. So not a lot to have this as a benefit. And I'll address that further here as we move into the financial and economic section. So I apologize in advance for the finance. This is just the way my brain works and the way I look at these things. And I think it's an amazing starting point for the town when we're looking at and comparing these two options. The messaging I want to provide here is that obviously when you receive two quotes, right, both NMAX and Skyfire have different proprietary software that looks at, okay, well, how much solar generation are we going to get? What is the revenue that we're going to generate from that solar revenue? And how does that change over the useful life of the asset? And one of the issues that we had initially is that how do you compare when you're dealing with apples and oranges? And really the approach I took here to make sure that we're getting the most, we'll call it the most conservative version here. So I'm not overselling anybody on this. At the end of the day, wherever we had differences in key financial assumptions when we're doing our financial assessment, I always defaulted to the cheapest and we'll call it the most conservative mechanism of doing so. What that lends itself is to two things. First of all, it just basically, again, provides a level of conservatism on this so that any of the numbers that you're seeing here, there's a very high probability that the benefits and the recoveries that we're going to receive from the solar deployment are going to be even better than what I'm showing you. The second thing it does is that it doesn't allow any of the companies to cheat, for lack of a better way. So it doesn't allow them to, play with, we'll call it, the forward pricing of power that we're going to get or the revenues that we generate. It doesn't allow you to cheat with the amount of generation that you're going to get. The efficiency of these solar panels are very, very comparable. They're one on top of another. So the numbers that I'm showing you here are very much an apples to apples comparison. So really, it boils down into a story of two different ways of financing a very beneficial project for the town. One comes back And you know what, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. The last piece there that I'll just mention some of the average numbers here that we're looking at. We're talking about generating 95,000 kilowatt hours just from this one location of solar production. And depending on what the solar draws at that facility, you're talking about anywhere from 30 to 40% of the facility you're paying for this project, or that you're generating on that rooftop for this project. So the cash flows that you're generating on this, right, you're looking at, and when I see annual net cash flows, we're talking about money that we have in the bank after paying for the capital. So we're talking about, we talked about NMAX, right, how that was going to cost us $9,000, right, of annual kind of deployment to service the debt or to service the financing terms that we're talking about. The 25-year average net cash flow that's listed here, I'm talking about money over and above that. So the town will be in a situation where not only has it paid for its debt, but it's receiving another $3.2 or $3,200 or $4,200 annually. So we're actually going to win on this year over year, and it's going to increase our cash flow. The last thing that we're going to get into here is this concept of a 25-year consolidated economic benefit. And I'm not going to get into the details of what net present value is and how that comes together. The real simplicity of this is, and it's well visualized in the graph that's provided, is really it just talks about two things. If council is looking and open to drawing down a small amount of debt after the capital funding or after the grant funding that we're receiving, then we're obviously going to, because of the lower capital costs and the lower financing costs to service that, we're going to make slightly more money over the life of the asset by going with Skyfire. If, for whatever reason, we're in a situation where, you know, the incremental money that we're drawing down on from a debt perspective, council is not into that, not looking to do that at this time, then obviously we have another very financially beneficial option, an NMAX's option, where basically we just pay a slightly higher lease option year after year to be able to do that. And we're going to pay a little bit more because we're paying 3% versus the 2.5 that I had listed for Skyfire. Between that and ultimately, between that and the fact that we're paying a slightly higher amount on the capital costs, you're going to pay a little bit more. And therefore, the cumulative benefit, cash benefit that you're going to make over the life of the project is going to be slightly less. So in the case of Skyfire, you're making roughly $53,000 of money for the town by jumping into this and funding it through that grant funding that we talked about. With the NMAX option, you're making slightly less at 44. And those are all supported by financial assessment and the time value of money and everything else that comes through it. So really, with that, and where I'll leave it is that there's other project considerations there you have listed here. This is what I like about it personally, is that first of all, it's a beautiful pilot project for solar for the town. We looked at 7 different projects. There was multiple millions of dollars of potential money that we could have made for the town by investing in some of these projects. We're not doing that. We're scaling it back to look at a very specific pilot project. Even that pilot project, thanks to that funding, makes us money and makes the town money over time, which is fantastic. The benefit to that, we'll communicate very well to the residents to show that there's an investment here made by this administration and by council, that we're looking and open to this. And it's a beautiful pilot to start looking at some of these other projects, right? So taking on a smaller project like this, executing on it well, will give us a really tangible understanding of how these solar projects come together and the benefits associated with those projects, which will set us up really, really well for looking at projects down the road to the extent council likes the results that they see and to the extent that we have an opportunity to draw down further from grant funding in the future as it comes up. And really, that's where I'm going to leave it at this time. Like I said, the next steps are what they are. I'd like to reiterate that the council's decision and approval to move forward with this project is going to be subject to the MCCAC's approval, right? So the next steps would involve us ultimately getting a brief engineering confirmation from the project engineers on the new town hall. They would come through, they'd provide that. We would finalize the final MCCAC application, which would be submitted. And only subject to them approving and providing the grant funding that we're expecting, would we then move forward with the project. The contracts and everything will be signed at this point in time. I won't sure we'll have the exit clause needed to withdraw if council decides that this project isn't viable without that project for whatever reason if we don't receive that funding. And so there's we're in a very, very strong and very positive position here, is that really, it's, like I said before, it's the story of which financing option do you see as the most applicable and chosen by the town to the extent that you're buying in with the solar deployment generally and see the importance of that. So with that, I'd love to open up to questions at this time.
Thank you very much, David, for your work and your presentation. Questions from councillors?
Yes, please, Sobel.
Councillor Sobel?
Thank you, and thank you, David. I really, really appreciate seeing this on the agenda, and I loved your presentation. So I have one question and two comments. The question deals with economic benefit and the figure of somebody on here? Am I still on?
So
okay.
you
are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the question I have is in regards to the amount of energy being supplied by this. Is that considered an economic savings for our building? Where would this power be focused on?
Great question, Your Worship. Part of the challenge, we talked about the 7 projects that we've looked at previously. One of the benefits of those other projects is knowing exactly what the power draw was going to be at those facilities and being able to understand that. Obviously, we're in a situation here, we don't have a project that's built yet. Numbers that I've seen, though, go back to that 30 to 40% that we're recovering. I would say, yes, it's very meaningful in the context of the draws, right? Those are unconfirmed until we actually have a bricks and mortar building where we're seeing what the drawdown is on any given year, right? But obviously that would be part of the remote monitoring that would be very plugged into, would be able to see that. And regardless, the generation that we're talking about and the conservatism that we baked into the numbers that we're showing you here should lend itself to even better returns. So that economic viability and the economic benefit would be even better than what we're looking at. So right now it's still great. Like from a rate of return standpoint, it's very supportive. From an we'll call it a present value of the economic benefits of this. It's very viable. It makes perfect sense. But in the context of how much power we're actually going to save specifically, that information just can't be confirmed at this time because we just don't have a building to be able to confirm it with.
Okay, thank you. 2 quick comments. But is there does somebody have a radio on or something? There's some background noise that's quite loud, actually. Anyway,
Your Worship, that's not on my end, but yes, I hear it too.
I'll just carry on. So I just wanted to comment and express my appreciation for your enthusiasm with the net zero project with Mark at Strathmore High School. He's presented to us. I've dealt with Mark on a couple of presentations now, and I'm so excited for their project and so glad I just saw that as actually a perfect fit for something for our municipality. So I'm glad you're going down that road. And lastly, I just do want to comment that I did share this presentation with members of the Sustainability Committee, and those that responded were very, very excited and supportive. So once again, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Any questions from other councillors?
I have a question, Your Worship. Councillor Bauer. David, I just want to say thank you for your presentation. I also have been looking with a lot of interest as to what Raymond, Alberta has been doing with their municipal buildings, and wondering when we would be able to develop our own solar initiatives here in Strathmore. So I'm very excited about this. I don't know, I know that NMAX is a local company, but I don't have any understanding of what Skyfire is, or can you tell me a little bit about their background, a little bit about them and why they're able to come in so low versus a company that is quite familiar with Alberta infrastructure?
Your Worship, great question. And thank you, Councillor Bauer, for putting that forward. Like Skyfire itself actually came in directly through our Sustainability Committee. One of the members, which I won't name, works for Skyfire. So she came through and she said, listen, I'm going to stay hands, at arm's length here, but I'm wondering if you'd be willing to talk to our business development, Greg Bowers, the general name. And at that point in time, like I said, most of the discussion had been centered around NMAX's financing offer that we had went through. And so coming back to your costs in terms of how they got it so low, I think there's 2 things happening here. Well, there's probably 3 things, but 2 things that I'll speak to more accurately right now is that, first of all, they do see the opportunity. They see the same opportunity in Strathmore that I do and that you alluded to previously. You'll note that the town of Raymond has been able to establish a net zero or a zero consumption status in their town. What that means is that every drop of, or every kilowatt hour that is consumed in their town is 100% offset with the solar generation they're providing with that town. The way they were, and I've spoken to Curtis, and we have actually gone out with Ryan to visit that facility and visit their facilities and get their take on this. And really, it's a function of grant funding. So the town of Raymond has, I want to be very careful. The town of Raymond has a very, very proactive approach at sourcing grant funding. As you'll recall, I think the first time Jason Atkinson from NMAX came back through and offered, or at least introduced this to council, this was probably 6 months ago now. 6 months ago, I probably would have been coming to council with other projects or a bit more of a buffet approach on this. But the reality is that the subscribers' interest in the funds have kind of drawn down to the point now where we can't just pile into solar right now and hope for it to be economically viable. It just wouldn't make sense without that grant funding. Now, having said that, there has been massive interest in that fund. To the credit of MCCAC, they're actually redeploying dollars from other funds into the municipal fund. So without giving too much away and without overpromising the council here, there's more to discuss. There's more to discuss. There's more opportunity on horizon, and this won't be the last time we'll be talking about solar. And only one other one is the one we're dealing with on this net zero program right now, who Skyfire is also participating at. So you can appreciate that a company like Skyfire, who's smaller than NMAX and has less financing power behind them, their only option out there in the market right now is to keep their margins thinner, so that they can come in competitive on these markets, because the value proposition put forward by NMAX and their financing option that they have is very, very, very attractive to a lot of municipalities. So their only option, or at least my interpretation of the work that they did in the short timeline that they turned this around, was that they have to come in competitive. And you'll note that even because of the capital option being cheaper with Skyfire and the fact that they are cheaper, if you look at the 25-year economic benefit and the graph that I was provided, the financial differences in the capital and the financing approach don't have a huge difference, as you can see in the difference in those two numbers, right? And that has to do with time value money. It has to do with when you're recovering solar, when you're deploying the money up front, and a few other things. But that's what I would say to your answer in terms of how they are able to come back so cheap. The second thing I'll finalize with that is that this isn't the last discussion, obviously, to the extent that we get some comfort from council and some direction from council on which partner that we're going to be talking about this. In terms of who and what they are and the projects that they have access to, their quote does provide a lot of that. And like I said, I'm happy to provide that. The other thing too is I'd be happy to have them come in and present to council as well, just to make that introduction, if requested.
That would be great. I would like to know, David, just one final thing. Because we are being asked to incur a part of this debt, and Golden Hills has some skin in the game too, have they been also approached to see whether or not they would put up some money for this project?
Sorry, can I clarify as to who they would be? You're talking about
Golden
the
Hills
solar
School
partner?
Division.
Oh, Golden Hills. Yeah, that's part of the uniqueness in some of the aspects that we're talking about. If council's open, I can take 2 minutes to kind of talk you through where we're at with that. Would that be okay to council at this point?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So, Your Worship, what I would say to that at this point in time, Mark Schweitzer is in a situation where they're trying to receive a very specific net zero certification on their facility. Part of the challenge that we have is that we do have an agreement with the school that lays out like whose roof is whose in terms of kind of access, but there is also shared access as well. And so when you start considering that and you start looking at the grant fundings and the limitations around the grant funding, it's very difficult for somebody who doesn't own an asset, right, to deploy their own solar on that asset without a really strong understanding of what the mechanics of that relationship and what the mechanics of that contract look like. I'm happy to work through those. And like I said, I'll be having conversations with Mark Swiders to navigate that. So I'm very comfortable that we can provide that support. But it's going to require some unique contracting skills and some flexibility around, making sure that the town is taken care of, ensures that the Golden Hill High School is taken care of, and make sure that they're satisfying the funding requirements, just to make sure that nobody's wasting each other's time.
Thank you.
And I do expect to be coming back to council with that.
Great. Thank you, David.
Your worship.
Councillor Peterson.
So thank you so much, David. So when you're talking about Golden Hills or any other future partner, are we talking about a renewable energy certificate, market-based instrument of any kind?
Your worship, carbon credits, I think, is what you're alluding to. Is that where you're going?
Well, I know that other communities have done, I think, what they call renewable energy certificates, and they it's connected to property rights, to the environmental, social, and other non-power conditions or attributes of any kind of a renewable energy program. So I've seen communities that have set up with their MDPs a solar project development or an energy renewal goal, and then within that they have renewable energy certificates that are connected to the processes that Councillor Bauer was referencing. And then one party controls that. I'm just trying to think about how, about that bigger picture from a governance model. How would council incorporate the whole idea of solar project development, especially with what we're looking at on the south part of our community into the future? So I'm looking at not specific to this project, but how this project would tie into the municipal development plan.
Your worship, I think it's a great point. And to address the initial point in terms of the governance and how this works, I alluded to 7 other projects previously in my report, and I also alluded to kind of a buffet approach. The options that the town of Strathmore have right now are significant. Like there is ample opportunity for solar deployment. The challenge of solar deployment in this world right now, in terms of the funding that is available or that is being communicated, is such that right now we have a very unique opportunity where you can invest with solar and it's still economically responsible and beneficial, i.e. the project shows positive returns over the life of the project. So there is no implied expense with investing in solar because of that grant funding. When you, and we had grant funding all teed up and ready to go and aligned with all of these projects. And because of various things, including just the subscribed interest that we saw in a short period of time, they're not shelved, but they've been set aside right now just to set the stage for this very manageable and this very targeted project that we're moving to here. I love the fact that you are thinking on those terms, because a larger project and a larger solar initiative, which would be part of the sustainability committee's kind of guidance and discussion basis, would allow us to explore whether or not the town and whether or not the council is supportive of looking at solar from a qualitative approach as well, right? Because of my finance background, it's very difficult for me to say, come in and spend, multiple millions of dollars and it's not going to make us any money, but we're going to make, it's good for the environment. And it's part of that, that climate kind of responsibility and stewardship that a lot of towns are focused on right now. I'm happy to have that discussion. I think there's opportunities for us to do both. I truly think that there's enough money out there and there's enough interest to be able to support these projects, whether it be through the MCCAC or whether it be through other avenues, where I'm optimistically hoping that I can come to council with a much larger deployment. And hopefully by that time we have a project and we have a pilot like this new town hall that has demonstrated the fact that it is possible and that it does make us money and it is a positive thing for the community, which provides a lot of, gravitas, a lot of support and a lot of momentum to being able to have that other discussion around looking at projects on a larger scale and the governance associated with doing so.
Yeah, that really does speak to it. When I was looking at Skyfire online and at some of the adjuncts that are happening, I think in communities in manageable smaller communities in the United States, that there really is a leading edge economic advantage for the people who are in at the front end, and it looks as if where municipalities are getting into that they are actually owners of deployment then within communities around solar power. And when we have a solar energy deployment process about to emerge in our community, I think there's enormous capacity for us to benefit. So anyway,
Your Worship, I wholeheartedly agree, and I love the fact that we're having this conversation.
Thank you, David.
Your Worship, I'm ready to make a motion if there's no other questions.
Sure. Any other questions from councillors?
Yeah, I have some questions, if you don't mind. So David, first of all, thank you very much for your work on this. So my questions revolve around just, I guess, the comparative, economics. So you're like this report, or you're not trying to say that it would be cheaper for us to go with solar than to just, not go with solar, let's say, based on like a price per kilowatt, or like what? Is it cheaper to go with this solar project than it would be to just buy our power from, the power company directly?
Your Worship, great question. And to clarify, this project with the grant funding makes us money. Month after month after month. So it would be cheaper for us to invest in this project from a solar perspective over the life of the project, as it will make us money to the tune of a present value of $53,000 in Skyfire's case, or $44,000 in the NMAX finance approach.
Sorry, and so like that, because when you say like we'll be making money, like because the town obviously pays a certain price per kilowatt right now for their power, and so if I look at if I'm reading this correctly, this is saying that over the 25-year lifespan of the solar setup, we'll be looking at around 94,648 kilowatt hours per year. Is that correct on average?
On average annually, correct.
Okay. And I can't remember exactly what the town pays for power right now, but I'm assuming it's probably less than I do, and I pay 3 cents a kilowatt. So that's about $2,800 a year. So is it correct to assume that these solar panels will produce around $2,800 to $3,000 worth of power per year? Like at 3 cents a kilowatt?
Your Worship, the revenue generated by the solar system is in the 7 cent per kilowatt hour average. I think it's 7.0721, and I can get you the actual financial assessment. One of the things that we made sure to do is that we're not using forward pricing, so we're not using like the escalation of solar power, the expectation of solar power going up to fund this project whatsoever. To your question around how much solar revenue is generated, what you do is you take that 8654, which is listed in that 25-year average annual revenue savings from the solar power, and you divide that back into your 94,658. That would give you an indication over the life of the asset how much we'd make per kilowatt hour. So 8654 648.
Oh, so we're talking about producing more power than the building is using, or because I thought you were saying something about 30 to 40%.
Yeah, no. So you have to appreciate solar doesn't happen. Solar doesn't generate all day long, right? So there's differences. So there's a few different components. There's the actual
like you
transmission
calculated
of solar.
around 2.94 hours per day on average, right? Like if I divide that by 365 at 88 kilowatts.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, and so because if we don't produce more than what the building uses, technically we're not making any money at all. We're saving whatever we would have spent on power, and so if the solar panels are producing power at a higher cost than what we can buy it for, aren't we losing money by going with the solar panels?
Yeah, no, and Your Worship, I totally understand the question, but the solar and the droughts do not happen at the same time. So in some cases, we're adding power back onto the grid at a pool price. In some cases, yes, we're offsetting and saving that solar panel, right? Or that solar savings.
Yeah.
Right. So there's two components there, but really when you're looking at it, it's the revenue that you're generating on a consolidated basis relative to the power that you're drawing down. And then in the context of Bob's question of, okay, well, how much of that does that represent in terms of the total draw from the town, right? The revenues and the savings that you're making are what's rationalizing the jobs that we're showing you in the consolidated economic benefit, if that makes sense. So it's both, it's savings and it's pool, it's generation as well that you're contributing back to the grid.
And so I guess just to be clear, so that you're saying that whatever, because like even if we're only producing power for, you know, under 3 hours a day that we can sell back onto the grid, you're saying that by the time we pay for all of, like, we pay for the capital cost, we pay for any financing costs, we pay for the maintenance, we pay for the, you know, the extra insurance, and then we pay for the decommissioning at the end, we're going to be coming out ahead, even though like we can only make, because like even if we're making, because, and again, like shouldn't, like, you know, if let's say we could buy the power, and sorry for being so kind of obtuse or like kind of thick about this, but if let's say,
Jason,
you know,
I welcome the commentary. It's great.
Okay, yeah. So if we could buy the power, let's say for 5 cents a kilowatt, and then, you know, we turn around and we can sell it for, you know, let's say 7 cents a kilowatt, so we're making a couple cents a kilowatt, then you're saying that by the time we pay all those costs, we'll have sold enough power to come out ahead of those costs at the,
we will have revenue.
Between what we would have.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I would be interested to see like a breakdown about like, you know, accounting for what we could buy the power for. You know, so let's say that, you know, the comparative advantage of, you know, one versus the other. You know, like I would be interested to see, I guess, yeah, like how much, you know, we would be spending if we stuck with, you know, no solar versus, you know, like when we account for all the costs with solar, and, you know, and if and the projected amount we could possibly sell, just to see like what the difference is. Unless it's like, because I read through this a couple of times, and I'll be honest, I didn't see that particular information, or like wasn't kind of clear to me. So,
Your Worship, what if we just walk through the financial assessment itself, so you could see how those numbers come together? Would that be beneficial?
Yeah, if you don't mind, sure, please.
I would be happy to share that with you, and Councillor, yeah, let's sit down and I can show you exactly what that looks like to make sure you're comfortable.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Your Worship,
Councillor Peterson.
the other thing we might want to consider is talking to Brooks. Just because they are ahead of us and they're comparable to us, but they use Skyfire Energy, I believe. I'm not certain of that. David probably would know. But I think they have about 75 acres of solar panels that they've connected into their community. I might just be interested to touch base with Mayor Morishita on that.
Your Worship, Wheatland also had their own deployment where they use Skyfire as well. So there'd be another reference point.
Yeah.
So you're saying, Councillor Peterson, delay on this moment, so we've checked a bit more? Is that, can you?
Your Worship?
Yes, David?
The one thing I would caution, and like I said, the dialogue is great, the discussion is great. The one thing I would caution Council this evening is that so April 2nd is when we were notified that they were reallocating funds on this. And I'm happy, like all the information and all the questions that are being asked right now, we have done versions of that, including the discussions and the assessments into other communities and which parties they chose to use.
Okay,
so
well,
I'd be happy to provide that information. It's referenced at the back of this report, and that community engagement and where Skyfire and NMAPs actually deploy their own systems. We're talking about two very viable service providers, both of which have very, very compelling offers. And depending on which, and coming back to the financing alternative and which one is more amenable to council, it's not so much that I have any concerns or that there hasn't been any vetting done to validate these two parties. We have definitely done that as an administration. I would not have put this in front of you without it. But my concern is around the funding itself. So to the extent if this is delayed, the risk of pursuing additional due diligence on this would just put funding at risk. And if we're okay with doing that, and if council sees that as an important part of this piece, happy to accommodate. We can definitely do that, but we would be putting funding at risk to a certain extent.
Your Worship, I only have one thing to add, please. And I really appreciate that David is being so forthright with answering all our questions. I mean, the bottom line on this is that the price of natural gas right now is so low and will continue to be so low that, you know, we need to, as a council, look at if there's a possibility to make money doing this, it's the right thing to do, because we should all be more sustainable and trying to incorporate real, you know, resources within our budget and within our town that talk to sustainability and talk to being kind to the environment. And this is one way that we can do it. And I think if we're going to talk about doing this, we need to have buildings within our municipalities that contain the infrastructure. The only one thing that I would like to see you do, David, if you are able to access the funding, is perhaps find out whether or not you can get funding for a solar cell, where we would be able to capture some of that solar capacity that is generated during the day, store it, and then sell it back to the grid at another time, at peak time, so that we can make a little bit more money along the way.
Your Worship, great idea. I agree with that.
Councillor,
I'd be happy to accommodate.
Councillor Montgomery, are you satisfied with what you've heard so far?
I'll be honest. I'm a little bit like, and again, I'm approaching this not from the perspective of, you know, it's you know, we should do it because it's, you know, it's solar, it's the right thing to do. Like I'm convinced of the fact that, you know, for instance, like with you know, natural gas power plants, that they're becoming cleaner all the time, and that, you know, that a centralized you know, power generation system that they can control, like, you know, the emissions from is I believe no worse and possibly even better than, you know, like solar, for instance, which, you know, involves the mining and transportation and processing of a lot of different chemicals and materials, and then as well as, like, you know, a number of other you know, issues as well, like as far as, like, you know, decommissioning and disposing of them, and so I, like, for me, I'm trying to wrap my head around the economic side, you know, and I'm looking at, you know, like the costs of, you know, like what it'll cost to buy, what it'll cost to finance, what it'll cost to maintain, what it will cost to clean, and then the extra insurance cost, and then the decommissioning cost, you know, and like I said, we're going to be paying a certain amount for power anyways. We are already obligated by contract to buy a certain amount of power from Fortis every year. And you know, if we actually start falling under that amount, not that we will, but if we start falling under that amount, we'll be obligated to buy that amount of power anyways. So we should. I'm
wondering if we should. Sorry to interrupt, Councillor Montgomery. I'm wondering if we could put a motion on the floor, and then you can finish the discussion, and then we can put it to a vote. Would that help?
Please.
Yeah, like I'll just say up front though, like unless I can kind of like wrap my head around the money side of it and actually figure out whether it's even approaching break even, then I would have a hard time supporting it at this point. So, but yeah, I'll follow you guys.
Your Worship, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the financial assessment, to Councillor Montgomery's point, is it a financial assessment that goes back to the economics that I think Councillor Montgomery is speaking to right now? Like I said, we have that detailed, we have that laid out, and it's also been vetted by both parties. Like we've looked at both of those things. And like I said, it's my job to make Councillor Montgomery comfortable with those numbers. I'm very confident that we can do so by looking at this stuff. But I would hazard that we look at that. And again, Jason, to the extent that we can sit down and look at this, I'm happy to look through that. Coming back to your point around how many kilowatt hours are generated, the system itself generates in the first year 98,100 kilowatt hours. There is 7.16 cents generated in revenues and the cost savings that we're talking about in that first year. The solar revenue that we're generating in that first year is $7,000 by doing so. So back to your costs, the debt service costs that come back to addressing that are the $6,000 that we spoke to. And if you factor in the fact that we own the asset and that's being funded by our own debt, really we're only paying for interest in that first year.
David, like when you say that we're saving, like say $7,000, like that's, if you were like kind of relating it to what we would be paying, if we bought it from another source, right?
Yeah, I completely understand it. One of the issues that we have is we don't have a building. We don't have a building to show you exactly how much the draw is going to be with that.
Right, but,
so
we can figure out. Sorry, I was going to say we can figure out how much power is generated by the panels, and then we can, look at what the average. We can look at what the average cost of power is, and like I said, I pay 3 cents a kilowatt. So if the panels are generating, 90 kilowatts a day or 90 kilowatt hours, and then, multiply that by, the whatever. Like I said, like at 3 cents a kilowatt, it looks to me like it's generating about $2,800 of power a year at 3 cents a kilowatt. Like that's what we would pay for the same amount of power that those panels are producing. Is that not correct?
Yeah. So you're into a contracted rate at 3 cents.
Yeah.
Because current spot pricing of power is at 7 cents.
Right, but and as I said, like the town is already contracted to purchase a certain amount of power every year, anyways.
From ATCO, yeah,
and so like I'm assuming they probably get a better rate than I do. But so I guess yeah. So I just want to make sure that in the end we're not paying more for power, including all the costs I outlined. I want to make sure that all those costs are not going to be more than what we would pay, for the power that we would just buy from the power plant directly, I guess. And so are you saying, and you're saying that that is the case, that we would definitely save money, including all those costs. We would still come out ahead, rather than buying it directly from the power plant.
So yes, except that I'm not very clear on the purchasing side of things, where you're coming from, Councillor. But yes, in the context of the total cash outflows and the total cash inflows that come to the town, the difference between those two things relate to a positive economic benefit for the town, and over the life of the project lends themselves to the dollars that we're talking about.
Question, Mr. Worship.
So if we were not to do this project, we would pay $50,000.
Somebody else a chance here, Jason.
Yeah. Sorry, Bob.
We've been on this for an hour. 3 cents per kilowatt is a special deal. It's not for everybody. I'm paying over 6, so let's use. You got to be careful with the numbers you're throwing around, because 3 cents was a deal, and it was only I believe a 3-year deal or whatever it was. So that's a contractual price. At any rate, I think Councillor Bauer is trying to make a motion, Your Worship. I think we should move on with this. We have a long night ahead of us yet.
Councillor Bauer?
I move that council approve administration to move forward with solar deployment subject to grant funding and give direction as to which solar partner and financing approach is preferred in delivering this project for the town.
You didn't.
You have to fill that in.
So
what did I do?
For the direction as to which company?
We go with Skyfire, please.
Okay, so you're gonna you give direction to Skyfire?
Yes, please.
The solar partner. Okay.
And give direction. Oh, I see. That was silly of me. And I would also, yes, I'd like to suggest that we have solar partners, Skyfire.
Is there any more discussion on that motion? Because Councillor Peterson there? And then,
Montgomery was before me.
okay.
No, you went first. That's fine. I go ahead.
I just have a question about cost. So in this actual motion, are we spending money, or are we just simply seeking grant funding and identifying a solar partner?
David?
Your worship,
Mhm.
subject to receiving the approval from council this evening, we will be submitting our approval. Subject to moving forward and receiving that grant funding, council will be committing to either the 109 from NMAX or the 78,000 for deployment to support the project on a net basis after grant funding. To the extent the grant funding was not received, this would come back to council.
Thank you. And then we would also have to note where the funding is coming from.
Exactly. Yeah, so the recommendation should have come with a potential price that we would have to put in and the funding source.
Your worship, the
Mhm.
suggestion from administration at this point in time, referencing pricing from the ACFA, would be to move forward with 15-year comparable debt at a cost of 2.521%. To the extent Hi-Fi was the choice. In the context of NMAX, it would just be to approve the lease option that they're offering.
Okay, I'm a bit confused now, I guess. Are we looking at an upfront cost now?
And a cost.
78,007.
And there's no, I'm not sure if James is able to speak. James, is there a funding source? James?
I think he got.
Are you able to?
Your worship, sorry, Ryan here.
Ryan?
I don't think Mr. Thackeray's on the call, so maybe I'll speak to it briefly. I think if council were to go with, you know what, Michael, kill me here. If council wishes to move forward with the Skyfire option, my recommendation would be that we append it to the cost of town hall and pull it from the town hall contingency. If council wishes to move forward with NMAX, sorry, then there's no debt required. The lease is paid for out of the revenues generated by the.
Thanks, Ryan, but I'm not. I can't speak for council. I'm not sure they're going to want to look into the contingency fund for the town hall project. I mean, we're dealing with a lot of things with that issue.
May I?
It could be that NMAX is our safest thing since there is no need to go into the contingency or to find a funding source for that. But I don't know how council feels now.
Your worship, that was the appealing part about NMAX as well. It's financially not quite as lucrative because it is a lease arrangement. There is no need to fund it at this point. It's essentially pay as you go.
Okay. Councillor Sobel, I see you've lit up in green.
No.
Oh. Councillor Sobel, or Councillor, sorry, Councillor Deputy Mayor Corbett.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I don't think that we can actually hook this into the contingency yet because we haven't even voted on that bylaw yet, or the borrowing bylaw yet, neither, right?
You're absolutely correct there. Mr. Teedy, can you hear me? I think you're on mute. Okay, thank you.
I can hear you.
Is there anything you can bring forward for this?
You know, I've listened to the discussion on it. Even if it was a lease arrangement, depending on the type of lease, if it's a finance lease, it would be considered part of our borrowing. So I think we would need to be careful on that fact.
So that would mean NMAX, you mean?
I'm referring specifically to the NMAX piece of it. I hadn't anticipated that we would be making a borrowing commitment on this particular agenda item.
Would it?
Can we
Yeah.
have it come back with the approval? And then
Are we able to just approve the grant, the application for the grant?
Yeah, maybe.
Grant funding?
Yeah.
But then
Your worship,
by a company.
if I may.
Yes, David?
So the one thing, and I think that's a great idea, if council is willing to provide the approval to move forward with the grant application and the funding, what that would allow us to do is to group as an administration and figure out what the appropriate application of the funds would be. If we could decide on which solar partner we would prefer, that would still give us the green light to move forward and achieves the funding that we're looking for, the grant funding that we're looking for. And then ultimately will allow us to find which pot it's drawn from at a future date, if that's council's preference.
Would we not be then committed to going forward with that company? I guess if your grant funding was turned down, that would be the escape clause?
Correct.
Okay.
And then it could come back with numbers, your worship.
Yeah. So then Lorraine, Councillor Bauer would, am I correct?
So-
in the motion would still stand?
It would be that council approve administration to move forward with solar deployment subject to grant funding from Skyfire.
But what if the grant funding is approved? Does that mean we are then defined?
Yeah, that's a good question. David, would we, if you got grant funding approval, would we then be committed to this project with the company chosen then? Then we would have
to have it.
Course.
Your worship, we would have to have an executed agreement to submit our MCCAC application.
But we
So
would
correct. We
out of funding for it, which is
in that arrangement, we would be committed to the 78 that we're looking at if Skyfire is in fact the choice.
right? So we'd be looking at that. Mr. T, have you got anything you could mention as far as funding sources for this, as far as alleviating some of the concerns for councillors?
One of the funding sources that we've looked at in past typically has been the financial stabilization reserve, but council would be allocating the expenditure to, or the funding for the expenditure from a reserve. And if it's council's desire to do that, that would be one option.
Can you refresh my memory as to what we have in there right now?
231,415.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
That's, yeah. Councillor Silva? Oh, I'm so used to you guys lighting up when you hit your microphones that when I see the green now, I go for it. I'm like a trained dolphin. Well, heavy dolphin.
And graceful.
A steel lion.
Your worship, perhaps what we could do to keep this moving forward but not commit us to anything would be that council approve us preparing an agreement and a grant application with Skyfire and bring it to council with a funding mechanism the first meeting of May for execution. It puts us a little bit behind timeline, but it's only 2 weeks, and then we can get the paperwork rolling, we can get the commitment and tighten up the financials a bit and bring it to council for sign off and execution on May 6th, it looks like.
That's 3 weeks.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's.
Is that still enough? Is that going to work though? We're going to lose our grant. Yeah, the grant would be gone. Yeah.
So, your worship, there is people waiting in line, right, for this grant. We've been, we have an expression of interest, which is why we have a developed relationship with Stephanie Ripley at the MCCAC. we obviously have to be comfortable with the financing mechanism, with the way that it was going to be done, so that there's no question there. There is concern from my front that would suggest that that's based on the dollar value that we're talking about. I would expect that it may be at risk in 3 weeks' time.
So can we approve the $80,000 amount to go to Skyfire, and if we don't get the grant, then we don't have to use it?
Yes.
The downside, like Councillor Cox was saying, if we do get approved, we're committed to finding money then, which could be problematic.
Your Worship, if I could speak.
Okay.
All right. So
My
yeah,
bad.
I guess I
Would this have saved us a lot of time and consternation if the recommendation would have had some sort of funding source options? So right at the start, we would have faced head on. We're looking at a fair chunk of change.
Well, I think though too that what they're saying is because it is part of the town hall building, and there is some $1,000 in contingency fee. There's really, this isn't to impact anything if we approve the borrow.
Yeah.
well, they are hoping to use the contingency for the staff parking lot too, though. So part of that money is spoken for, or at least hopefully spoken for.
Can we ask Michael if he has any thoughts on this?
Please let
Yes, Your Worship. The way we see it at this time is that if the borrowing bylaw is approved, we'd have a contingency of about $450,000. The reason we wanted to set it that way was because we felt that amount of money would pretty much eliminate any real risk of us having to come back to council for more funding. The lower you set that contingency, or the more quickly you use it, the greater that risk that we might be coming back to council.
Exactly. And this kind of Deputy Mayor Corbeil's comments that we haven't passed this borrowing bylaw for the town hall project. So we'd be committing money that we haven't even discussed, which will be another long discussion, and possibly either approve or not approve. So I find this very frustrating, to be honest. I'm sure everybody else is too.
It's just they just
Your
gave
Worship, if I may.
they put it in a very bad.
David, I think
Your Worship, what I'm hearing here, I want to be very, very. So this is a bit of a slam dunk win in the context of the money that we're being handed out. What I'm hearing from council right now is that there's time to address Councillor Montgomery's questions. There's some other things that were tabled. Quite frankly, my preference would be not to violate and to, we'll call it, I'd like to distinguish this project separately as its own standalone mechanism, right? And not put Michael's project under duress, right, to be able to fund this. What I'd ask, and with Ryan and Mr. Tidi's approval, is that we just have a follow-up conversation on this, be able to come with council with specific direction as to where that would actually came from in preparing the report, in drawing down on the ACFA debt, the mechanics and associated with that. There was discussion that I expected to have with Mel on that. My understanding of that was that it would be a separate draw for debt for that $78,000, and depending on council's interpretation of that and how that was going to be financed, would lead us to whether we go through the ACFA approach or whether we go with NMAX's financing, right? Which is two very different, albeit from an accounting standpoint, it could be categorized as that. In the context of the cash flows associated and the benefits to the town are two very different things. What I would suggest is that you give us a week to do that. I don't think we're in a position right now where where you guys are comfortable approving something here. I'd prefer to just take this back and map it out myself, to be honest with you, just to make sure everybody's comfortable.
But our next council meeting is not till 6th.
Your worship, and that would be the trade-off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm going to withdraw my motion, please, Your Worship.
Okay. Thank you. So, are we left with accepting this report as information then?
I would
Councillor Peterson, sorry.
I would so move we accept the report for information.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peterson. We have a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll go to each of you. Councillor Bauer.
Aye.
Councillor Cox.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Corbeil.
Aye.
Councillor Montgomery.
Aye.
Councillor Peterson.
Aye.
Councillor Sobel.
Aye.
And Mayor Fuel is an aye. David, I want to thank you for everything you've done as far as presenting us with these options. Obviously, we're in a situation with the town hall and other things that are going on that we're just not comfortable at this point. We don't know enough about funding sources. So it's no reflection on everything that you've done. Your report was concise and clear, and you spoke very well on it. I'm always amazed at your level of understanding of a lot of these issues that you deal with on a regular basis. So I'm very much, and I'm sure council is very much appreciative of all you've done and the other staff who are part of this as well.
Yes, thank you, David.
Your worship, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to bringing this back with the additional information that's needed to make decisions.
Okay, thank you, David.
Thank you.
And that brings us to 9.3 economic development updates. Who is speaking to this?
Oh, Your Worship, I believe Mr. Rebello will be speaking to this.
Okay. Good evening, Justin. And
Good evening, Council. Can you hear me?
yeah.
Thank you for this opportunity, and hope you all had a wonderful Easter weekend. Good to see you all, and we're just excited here to provide a quick update on economic development. We'd obviously hope that this would be a little bit more engaging and in detail, but we look forward to doing that in the near future once we're all back together here. So 2019 was an exciting year for the town, as you know. This was our first venture into economic development, and really working with many of our business partners as well as developers and also builders to increase the presence of the town and to give our partners more tools for their success, which ultimately is the town's success. This started in 2019 with the Emerging Opportunities workshop that we hosted in the summer. What this really came out was that many developers and builders are really excited to be in the town. They were just looking for the town to together more tools and avenues and also processes for them to be able to market and to be able to host their projects. So that we put together a storybook, which I believe we previously distributed. That storybook has been very well received by a lot of the development industry as well as real estate agents who've been using it to market the town. The economic development videos have also been a great success. There have been lots of different stakeholders that have used that as part of their marketing campaigns, as well as for the town to be able to show what we're all about and to be able to tell the great story that is Strathmore. So we showed that at the CMRV board meeting where we were given that opportunity. We definitely received some very positive feedback from that. The mayor was there as well. Last year, something that was started by the group was really meeting with our local businesses and completing a business satisfaction survey. So over 100 businesses were contacted as part of the survey, and a SWOT analysis report was actually created. Part of that, the next steps were to meet with some of the businesses really try and kind of understand more what their responses were and to identify larger trends. These meetings will continue to take place, and especially during this COVID-19 time where so many of our local businesses are struggling and are increased challenges as we move towards more the recovery and the revitalization part of economic development. Those interactions and those partnerships and those meetings are going to be even more important. We were excited to launch the economic development website last year. So really what this website was a one-stop shop for many businesses as well as also customers looking to see what different businesses and industries that the town offered. And it really helped to put Strathmore in the regional trading map. And there's some really great tools. So again, once we're all together, we'll be happy to walk you through that or send you the link for that yourself to be able to navigate. A couple of other projects that also we received grants for that we're really moving forward in the draft stage is a tourism website. This will really help a lot of the regional events that can help bring visitors to the town and to be able to experience what we have to offer, and as well as a visitor's guide. So our hope is to involve council in terms of receiving feedback on the website and the guide, really make you part of the process. The key areas you want to promote and what are the key messages and what are our priorities. You know, there's businesses, there's residents, there's also tourism. So we really need to work with you in terms of what you want to prioritize and what are the key messages and the marketing materials you want us to work to put out there. So that's a quick summary of what we did in 2019. So as you know, with the COVID-19, we were really excited to be deployed to the ECC. So myself and Chuck, as well as Cam. And what we've done is we've actually set up a business hotline. This hotline is open from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. every day. And businesses are just able to call the town and make a personal relationship again and have us navigate the businesses through some of the financial application processes for them to receive subsidies, just as well as some of the businesses having questions on whether they can still operate, and for us to give them some tools and some ideas on how to continue their businesses as best they can. We've really tried to market and amplify the COVID-19 Strathmore Business Information page, which is on Facebook. That page is a fantastic initiative that was started by 2 local businesses, and so I believe there's about 2,300 members on there right now. So it's really a central spot for every business in town, as well as customers, to be able to go to and see what's open and how they can keep businesses running. So again, right now we're sort of on the business retention strategy, but we look forward to moving into more of the recovery, revitalization, and be able to really work with these businesses and celebrate the Shop Local campaign that was so successful. And it's been great reading a lot of the comments on the Facebook page that so many of the Strathmore citizens want to support their businesses. So we look forward to moving with that. And again, so, you know, our goal is to really work with council on the economic development strategy moving forward, what your priorities are, what your key messages are. Really one of the best things about the economic development video, which we will show you, what we had planned to show you, was that everyone on that video was local, and it was a local message, a local story. There wasn't any town staff in the video. That we really want to amplify and reflect what the local businesses and the local stakeholders think about the town and what makes us great. And So, so many of the great stories and the themes are already to be able to prioritize those and to package them in the right way. So we look forward to working with you and involving you in the near future and doing more of an engaging workshop during Committee of a Whole, hopefully in June. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your presentation, Justin. Questions from councillors?
I just have one, Your Worship. Justin, if you don't mind, could I please ask which initiatives that Alexandra was involved in, please?
Yeah, so Alexandra, to my knowledge, she led a lot of the grant application processes. So we received quite a few grants in terms of the tourism website that we've launched, as well as the visitor's guide. I believe she worked pretty closely as well with some of the business surveys and some of the meetings. But I believe, and the economic development video, she worked very closely on there too. I said, I've recently taken over this role, as you know, the last 2 or 3 months, but Ryan would have a bit more knowledge in terms of her involvement back in 2019, but those are some of the main projects I believe that she was working on.
Do you know the approximate amount of the grants that she was able to receive?
Not off by hand. I have a ballpark figure in my head. I just don't want to give you a wrong number. So I can certainly pull those grant figures for you. And some of them were quite considerable. So I know that the tourism website, which I believe initially was around $15,000 to put together. I believe the town only paid about $3,000 of that. So we received a pretty considerable grant for the actual tourism website. But I can certainly pull those numbers for you for the other ones.
Thank you.
Your Worship,
Yes, Councillor Cox.
I'd like to make a motion that council accept the report for information from Justin.
Thank you very much for that motion, Councillor. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing
Your
none?
Worship, I just think what Justin has done shows tremendous potential and capacity, foresight. The feedback that I've got from community here and people in the city has been considered, and it's a credit to our community, the work that he's done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. So we have a motion on the floor from Councillor Cox. Councillor Bauer?
Aye.
Councillor Cox?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Corbeil?
Aye.
Councillor Montgomery?
Sorry, aye.
Always got it. Councillor Peterson?
Aye.
Councillor Sobel?
Aye. Aye.
Councillor Fuel, Mayor Fuel is an aye. Thank you very much, Justin, for all your work and for your presentation tonight. And that moves us to 9.4, Canadian Badlands Shareholder Representative. Is that you again, Justin?
I'd like to make a
sure.
motion, please, if there's no discussion.
Sure. Councillor Bauer?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that council designate Chuck Proctor to be administration's representative on the Canadian Badlands Shareholder Representative Committee. Currently, we have Alexandra and myself designated as shareholders. I have taken on the position of being a member at large. I was elected on the day of the, I think it was April 6th, April 8th, our first meeting of the Badlands. And we recognized at that time that we didn't have a current member of our administration. So I would just like to submit that motion for your approval, please.
Okay, I'm going to sound like I'm not very bright, but you just made a motion, right?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. It's been a long evening. So I'll go to each councillor again alphabetically. Hope I do it well. Councillor Bauer.
Aye.
Councillor Cox,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Corbeil,
Aye.
Councillor Montgomery,
Aye.
Councillor Peterson,
Aye.
Councillor Sobel,
Your Worship, I didn't see an invite for discussion, and I just have a quick question. The form says that there's this person would be joining the 2 council members.
Oh.
On page 2, and I'm just wondering if that's a typo, or do we have a second council member on there that I don't know about?
There's 2 positions,
Yeah.
but there's only 1 counselor.
Thank you. Aye.
And I am an aye. So that motion is passed.
Chuck.
Chuck, yes. Item 9.5, Aspen Pond Drainage. Brian Roycroft, are you speaking on this?
Your Worship, if it's drainage, it's always me. That's become my raison d'etre. I won't belabor this because I feel like I've talked a lot about drainage issues. Last season, the town started receiving a number of complaints from 4 homeowners around Aspen Pond there. With some localized flooding out of the pond. Staff assessed it, and it doesn't appear that that the ditches are functioning as they properly should. Again, being candid, there hasn't been the preventative maintenance on the ditches and a number of our drainage structures in the area to keep them flowing. In that particular case, the work required, because it is so extensive, is beyond the capacity of our equipment. We don't have the proper attachments for the excavator, and we don't have the smaller excavator that can work in that area. So the initial budget on this came in at about $50,000, moving as much of the work as possible to operations. We've been able to bring it to $27,000. So the request is that council authorize drawing that, we called it $30,000 to add a little bit of contingency there to remedy drainage there. We'd like to pull that from the utilities reserve. That was the reserve council created this year. With the adding that $6 to utility bills. So that is the intent of it. I kind of hoped our first draw on it would be for something more exciting. Maintenance of our drainage, surface drainage, is one that really has fallen behind. It wasn't a priority of, we'll say, town administration for a number of years, and we're seeing the consequences of it. The new staff in infrastructure and operations are taking a much more serious approach now, developing inlet and outfall inspection processes. We started clearing ditches now. I come back to this story a lot, but we've uncovered things that weren't even on plans that we digitized. So, in excess of 2 decades in some areas. Formalizing culvert inspection processes. So we hope to have all our culverts inspected by staff this year. And then finally beginning to track and prioritize maintenance on all our drainage systems. So we've got a long road to hoe here. It's going to take time to get back to where I'd like to be. And there will likely be more incidents like this as we find places where our equipment can't maintain. But I suppose it doesn't always matter where you're standing. It matters which way you're facing. And we are confident that infrastructure and supported by ops is at least moving us in the right direction here. So the request is that council allocate $30,000 to remedy drainage issues at Aspen Pond, with monies to be drawn from the utility reserve.
Councillor Cox?
Thank you, Worship. Ryan, my first question was, where is the utility reserve? Because I didn't see it, but I didn't remember. So thank you very much for clarifying that right off the start. Then my next question is, how much is in there right now?
Your worship, I will turn to Mr. Teedy for that. We should have the first part of our utility bills in there to fund it. Obviously, we can't draw from it if there isn't enough, but it would generate, and Mel will correct me if I'm wrong, about $400,000 a year. So even with that first billing cycle in, we were comfortable that it was okay. Mr. Teedy?
Yes, the amount that you referred to of $400,000, that was the estimate that we would raise for 1 year, and so 1 month utility reserve payment by the customers will cover this project.
And so we have what, 2 months now?
Well, we would have 3 months.
Okay, so we're still seeing people pay their utilities going along.
Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Deputy Mayor Corbio?
Thank you, Worship. I guess I'm going to clarify the one thing, since we are only approving 30,000. It just confused me when we saw the graph or whatever, and it had the work that's to be done by operations. It was going to cost $12,900. We're actually not paying our operations. Like, we don't need that money. Is that what we're saving?
Your worship, yeah, the chart is a bit unclear there. I'd put that in to say the initial quote we had was for about $50,000. We're going to use our own staff for some of it, and yeah, just deployed them to that rather than other jobs. So we'd be paying them anyways. We're just redeploying them to save some dollars.
Awesome. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Corbio.
I have a question, Your Worship.
Councillor Bauer.
Thank you. I would just like to know, Ryan, people are going to wonder if this has anything to do with the smell around Center Street, because that pond is supposed to be draining into that culvert. Is there any chance that that could be contributing to the smell, like with a backup, or because it's not flowing properly?
Your Worship, I would suggest we not make that linkage. The Center Street pond doesn't tie into that system. The Center Street pond ties into the system that flows south. Aspen just flows into surface, or eventually flows into storm drainage. That being said, you know, I will come back to the general lack of emphasis on maintenance of some of these more boring ditching structures does slow drainage, especially during spring freshet, and probably contributes to some of the odor issues around town. But in this case, I wouldn't blame it on that.
Thank you.
Your Worship, we need to extend the meeting.
Yes, we're going to need a magical motion from Councillor Montgomery, who appears to have left the building. So, for a motion to extend the meeting till next.
I move to extend the meeting till 10:30.
Corbio, do you have a time that you want to do that too?
9:35. I don't know, 10:30 probably.
10:30. Okay, Councillor Montgomery, I'm sorry, but Deputy Mayor Corbio stole your thunder. Do we have a motion on?
No, that's like my most important function here.
We have a motion to extend the meeting to 10:30 at a maximum. And Councillor Bauer?
Aye.
Councillor Cox?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Corbio?
Aye.
Councillor Montgomery?
Fine, aye.
Assad, aye. Councillor Peterson?
Aye.
Councillor Sobel?
Aye.
And I am aye begrudgingly. So, Aspen Pond drainage. Any other questions, councillors?
Your Worship,
Councillor Peterson.
I would move that council allocate 30,000 remedy drainage issues at the Aspen Pond with money to be drawn from utility reserve.
Thank you for your motion. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll go to Councillor Bauer.
Aye.
Councillor Cox,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Corbeil,
Aye.
Councillor Montgomery, Councillor Peterson,
Aye.
Councillor Sobel,
Aye.
and I am an aye. Which brings us to item 9.6, the Strathmore Municipal Building CRP option. For the people who are at home watching, we did some discussion on this last week, so we're familiar with the options that are coming to us. And I believe, Michael, you're going to be doing a presentation on this.
Actually, Your Worship, if you don't mind, I have a motion ready.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Montgomery.
All right. So I'm going to, and if you don't mind, I'll speak to it afterwards. I'm going to move that council select. Well, actually, so it's none of the options, but I'm going to move that council not finish the space at this time, and I'll speak to that, I guess. So I believe that in order to help keep the cost of the building down and avoid any further cost overruns, it would be sensible to leave the space unfinished at this time. And I think that when we do look to finish the space, if that's going to be what we do, then the time will come when we can use we'll have more control over being able to use local contractors and companies and getting people here work to finish the job when the time comes. So that's why I would like to make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion on that motion?
I'd like to speak to that, Your Worship.
Councillor Sobel?
As council is aware, one of the casualties of our former project manager's efforts to reduce the cost of the new building was, unbeknownst to council, to eliminate a large meeting room on the second floor. Upon discovering this a few weeks ago, I raised some concern, mostly due to the fact that I have had difficulty at times securing a meeting room in our present building for any type of group over 6. The idea to utilize the proposed commercial site that we're speaking of on the south end of the first floor for this purpose came to me for a number of reasons. Changing this space to a meeting room for larger groups is something I see as a necessity, and not just now, but for future councils as well. And in regards to the point that Councillor Montgomery made, it's what quite often happens is these projects that are put aside for lengthy periods of time. Our book of business is people, and in spite of the current restrictions, meeting with people to discuss issues is a very important part of this job. Without this dedicated space, council and administration will once again have to rely on dragging tables out of a closet and setting them up in chambers. A dedicated and large meeting room could, however, facilitate meetings with our neighbors from Siksika, the RCMP, and Wheatland County. It will allow council to convene board meetings for the Chamber of Commerce, Community Futures Wild Rose, the Strathmore Handybus Board, and the Wheatland Housing Management Board. It will enable the Recreational Facility Development Committee, the Strathmore Wheatland Addictions Team, the Sustainability Committee, and the Traffic Advisory Committee to meet in this building. With the addition of administration hosting numerous larger size meetings as well, this space promises to be a busy one. It's estimated that our present meeting room is utilized on average half of every day. Clearly, I support having our facility host meetings, especially when our duties include us being part of this group. One of the main reasons for council choosing this location was to draw people to our site and thereby have them visit the downtown area. For these reasons, I'm unable to support utilizing this space as a commercial location, as it's more desirous that the occupants of our new building venture out to our downtown for sustenance, thereby supporting those businesses. I'm also an object to leaving the building as is, which is empty, because I really do believe that we need a meeting room. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Sobel. Any other comments from other councillors? Councillor Peterson?
Your Worship, to echo that, I know that an estimate of $30,000 $1,000 a year as a landlord for a commercial rental unit was thrown out as a possibility. And I know also that when Mr. Doug Griffiths of 13 Ways also spoke to us, talked about competition being a good thing. But I think
excuse me, Your Worship. So my motion says nothing about using the space as a commercial space. I'm simply making a motion to leave it unfinished at this time, so that we can save money and then hopefully get local companies to finish it when the time comes. But sorry to interrupt.
So I'm assuming though that you have purpose in leaving it.
Again, like to save money and so that local, when the time comes to finish it, even if it's, just, like shortly after, like the business or the building is done, I just want to have control over who finishes it. And I believe we'll have more control and be able to get local people working on the project a lot more easily than if we leave it with PCL.
If I could interject here, and Michael, maybe I can turn to you for this. I was on a call last night with Premier Kenny, the ministers, including Minister Madhu, and a question was concerning the new shovel-ready projects that will be submitted by various municipalities. And they said that they're looking they do want to find ways to relax or have the New West trade agreement go, I guess, I'm not sure if relax is the best word, but they'd be able to seek local work. So if the province is going to relax those regulations, and he said he was in a conference call with the premiers of BC, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. My question to you concerning Councillor Montgomery's motion is, would we have opportunities for locals to do work in that conference room based on the concept that the Alberta government is looking for more kickstart project in municipalities? Local economies would then be helped. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I believe so. I'll try and answer that on the basis of, I suspect if we're keen on having local contractors do that work, I believe that Councillor Montgomery's motion would facilitate that more easily than if we were just to tell PCL to proceed with finishing the building while they already have tenders and subcontractors for all of the other building finishes. It might be a more costly way of doing it at the end of the project, but it would be a way in which council would have somewhat of a better ability to attract local contractors to do that finishing.
Okay, thank you.
That we'd have to wait until we do it.
My second question to you would be, how noticeable or how would it affect the aesthetics of the building for that space to be sitting empty when the building is having its opening and we're touring the place?
Yeah, that's a value judgment in terms of the eye of the beholder. I believe that it would be desirable to finish the building if that is your intent. If your intent is to use it as a CRU, we'd be in that situation regardless, because it would be unfinished until sometime after it would be developed as a CRU after we complete the building and open and commission it for our own use.
But the other part of that could be that if you left it undone, it could be developed.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that, Your Worship.
Well, we're not bound to a CRU space there by leaving it unfinished. At a later time, council could have it developed as a meeting room.
Absolutely, Your Worship. The decision does give the town the ability to do that. It would just be a matter of once you of setting some funding aside to do it and having the discipline to make sure that that's your priority for that funding.
Okay. Are there any other comments, councillors?
Question.
if I could finish. Your worship.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Peterson.
So I still think that taking note that this is still a decision, and whether or not we want, I think it's admirable to have it set up for a shovel-ready project, but I don't think it's in any way reasonable, especially, you know, for the same reason we didn't make a motion earlier on something for which we didn't have a budget. We know the cost now. We don't know the cost of this particular project into the future. And I just think that the last thing we need on this build is one more element of complexity. And so for me, it is imperative that we have meeting space in that community building, and that we know what that meeting space will cost us, and that we should move forward to complete the building. The last thing we need is a multi-million-dollar building that's incomplete, and we have knowables in front of us. And I just think that the meeting space is so tremendously needed by our organization that I would not be in favor of this motion, Your Worship.
Thank you. Maybe I can explain myself well. I wasn't thinking of the meeting room or the CRU space as a shovel-ready project. I was wondering if Michael felt that move by the province to do those things and to circumvent or have the New West trade agreement relax, if that would give us wiggle room on the project for us to seek local contractors on that meeting room space. CRU.
Your Worship.
Ryan? Yeah.
Right now, the town policy, roughly mirroring the New West partnership, would be that if it's less than $75,000, we only have to seek a few bids. We don't have to go to broad public tender.
Yeah. So we do have an find.
So if the project is clearly separated, and would have to be careful to make sure it's clearly separated, you know, that it doesn't look like we're trying to do an end run around PCL, but we could do it with a less broad scope, looking for, if we're calling for quotes, we pick who we call.
Okay. I think I have Deputy Mayor Orville and then Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to be clear, though, it's not like we don't have meeting space. Like, we do have a meeting room on the first floor that will support, I'm just looking at it, I believe it's 10 people, and they have a couple ones with 6 and 4. And no, that's not large. That is the size of our meeting room, I would say now. That's used. The town does have other locations. I know that that's not ideal, but I look at spaces of like, especially of that size, and for it to be vacant a lot of the time. I know they say half a day, but that half a day is in a meeting room. I don't know if it would be sufficient to say that the 10-person meeting that they have already in the building would be sufficient. I guess that would be one of my questions. I don't know what the future is going to hold. I would think that we would be able to go back to normal behavior at some point in time, but if we can't, and we've built this huge conference room, I don't know. I would just like to wait if we had the choice. I do support a CRU.
Okay.
Anyway, so that was my one question to James is, it would, in his reference to the half a day's use of the conference room, but the 10-person conference room that they have in their blueprints already, would that be sufficient?
Your Worship, I don't think James can answer for technical issues, but maybe I can. The one conference room being referred to is that meeting room in the town hall, the one in the corner there with the big TV that I can't make work. The town actually has a few other meeting rooms that we also aren't including in that. There's the FCSS boardroom that is used. There's the unofficial meeting room in the infrastructure offices, my office, which staff book, and kick me out. And then there's the 7-Eleven conference room. So in fact, the town effectively has 3.5 boardrooms now that are all heavily used. It's just there's only one in the town hall right now. So as we bring staff together and lose those meeting rooms, there will be more pressure put on, the one meeting room currently proposed in town hall. Staff will make do with whatever council decides. And Ms. Swatsky's reminding me too that we also use council chambers as an unofficial meeting room. So staff will make do with whatever council allocates ultimately. But in addition to that, there really are 4 boardrooms right now that staff use, not just the one.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Power, I believe, was next.
Thank you, Your Worship. This has been a very divisive issue for us. And I think that in light of what's happening with more of these virtual types of meetings and the fact that some of our councillors feel that this would be a better CRU space and some feel that it would be a better meeting space, but we really don't know. And this building is not going to be finished for a very long time yet. I would like to support Councillor Montgomery's motion and just have a little bit more time to see what happens. And if it is such a small amount to finish and we can go through local contractors, I would think that would be a big bonus at that time. It would allow us to consult a little bit more with the community to find out if it would in fact be adverse, if people would be adverse to having a commercial space in the park, or if it would be embraced. It might allow us to find out with the nonprofit groups that are in our community if a meeting space would be used. I just think that this allows us a little bit more time. I just did want to ask Mr. Stanhouse, though, are we going to lose out on the opportunity of putting in a firewall, or will the firewall be put in regardless? Or if it's a meeting room, are you still able to put a door from the town hall into that space at a later date through a firewall?
Great question, Your Worship, through to Councillor Power. The issue of putting a door in is something that could be a decision you make now. It could be a decision that you make at a future date. It would be a little bit cheaper to put the door in now if you believe you'd like to have that flexibility. The door, because we would be maintaining the fire separation, the door would necessarily be a fire separated door. In fact, so the design of the door would have to be conducive to fire separation. If in the future you decide that you just want to use it as a meeting room, you could put in a door at a future date that would not be requiring the fire separation. That's a choice that council could make down the road. But once you do that, then you're in effect making that that piece of the town hall part of the town hall. You wouldn't be in a position then to lease it to outside parties. So if you were to delay the finishing and delay installing the door, all of that is doable. I suspect that the cost would be a little bit higher than doing it now as part of the project.
Okay, thank you for that, Michael.
Thank you.
You, Councillor Bauer.
Yes.
Other comments from councillors? So we have a motion on the floor.
We have the motion read, Worship.
Pardon me?
Do we have the motion read again?
Sure. Councillor Montgomery.
So my motion is to leave the space unfinished for the time being.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to leave that CRU space unfinished. Councillor Peterson?
So leave it finished, is there a date at which we would finish it? And is there a budget amount attached, like a maximum budget attached to it? Because we've just heard that that the cost will most certainly be higher.
Well, and so like, with my construction experience, I can, I would also say that, yes, the cost will be slightly higher. We're looking in, the 5 to 15% range higher. So, instead of say $40,000, it could be, $50,000 or something like that. But again, rather than the $40,000 flowing straight out of the community, we finish it using local people, and even if it's $50,000, that $50,000 stays in the community.
But I think if I could interject, Ryan has said that we still can use local people, so that's kind of a moot point. We're going to be able to use local contractors if we decide to finish it, because it's under a certain amount of money.
No.
Your worship, perhaps I should clarify that. No, I don't believe that we would, other than if the subcontractors who have been essentially tendered and hired, hire local staff as part of their operation. So we would not have that control because PCL will finish it.
Okay, I stand corrected. Thank you.
Decision. Yeah.
So, Councillor Sobel.
One more question to Mike. So I'm going to presume that this motion is going to pass and nothing is going to happen to this room for who knows how long. So my question is, and I don't know how this room will be left unfinished, but I'm just wondering, is it possible to just like throw a big table in there? Something we can get at IKEA for $2.99 or something, and some plastic chairs, just in case we do have a meeting for 15 or 16 people. We have a place for them to meet. I'm being facetious. Don't bother answering. That's fine. Thank you, Michael.
I do have a clarification, Your Worship.
Yep.
So do we risk any issues with PCL around the subcontracting?
If the motion was to pass, no, because essentially what we'd be doing is carrying on as we have planned to all along. So the motion is in effect would effectively mean no change to the contract. So where there'd be no change order.
So that would mean that they would just leave it.
The space would be left unfinished. So essentially the floor would be concrete, the walls would be unfinished. There would be power to it. There would be some heat to it, but it would be a fundamentally unfinished space.
So we now have some approximate dates for completion of the building. Am I correct?
Yes, we anticipate completion at the end of October, early November at this time.
So would there be a consideration in this motion? Like, I can think of nothing worse than to open a building that was incomplete, that the community had put this much into, and then have this kind of a disaster, this ugly, unfinished.
Your Worship, yeah, if I could speak one more time before closing debate. So again, this is only continuing along with the plan that administration has presented to us. I'm not suggesting that we deviate from the plan that administration gave us, and I can appreciate, I guess, where you guys are coming from to some extent. Like, you want to see the space finished, and honestly, there's nothing stopping us from lining up people that are ready to go the moment PCL opens up that site to other people, and having that space finished, if that's what we so choose. And it could be finished within 2 weeks. So I'm not personally concerned about the building looking unfinished. That's that area by administration's plan up till now was going to remain unfinished and was just going to be closed off to the public anyways. And again, like I like the idea of having we've had one of the important, very important things to this council with this building was that we get local people hired as much as possible. And this is one final way for council to have a say and say, like, especially in a time where, never mind oil prices, but just with the economic damage that we're seeing, this is one way that we can actually ensure that we are putting our residents' tax dollars back into the pockets of residents.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Montgomery. So we have a motion on the floor, and I'll call the question. Councillor Bauer,
Aye.
Councillor Cox,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Corbeil,
Aye.
Councillor Montgomery,
Aye.
Peterson,
Nay.
Councillor Sobel,
Nay.
and I'm a nay. So the motion has passed. Thank you, everyone. Moving on, council, since we only have about a half an hour and we have two major items, should we skip the reports from councillors? I'm sure meetings haven't happened anyway, so should we move right on to bylaws? There are no items directly related to council. Item 12, bylaws, 12.1, bylaw 1921 fees. But does anyone have any disagreement with?
No.
Okay, so 12.1, bylaw 19-21 fees bylaw amendment bylaw on page 67. It has Kathy Jones. Is Kathy on the line with us?
Your worship, I can speak to it real quick, I think.
Okay.
This is a very quick bylaw in response to a complaint that was made before the world kind of blew up. Right now, when a home is sort of completed, gets occupancy, but isn't sold, isn't occupied, the town continues to levy sort of full freight on utilities. This was brought to our attention. It does feel a bit unfair because an occupied home isn't using garbage. It isn't, using water, that sort of thing. So staff are just proposing for homes that have never been occupied, and that's not unoccupied homes, but before a home actually officially ties into town services, that we reduce the utility fee from the current rates to just a flat $40, which wouldn't include garbage, wouldn't include full maintenance, and then the owner or the builder carry that $40 a month until such time as they sell the home and residents come in, at which point they pay full freight. It's a small break, but it's a little bit of a break for guys who've built places and are carrying inventory right now.
Thank you very much for that.
At any time, we're looking at about 7, maybe 8 homes in Strathmore under this situation. So it's a nominal amount a year. It's more symbolic.
Okay, thank you. I guess I was concerned some of these we were looking at might have some contentious items that we would be discussing for a while. So any comments or any questions to
Your worship, I move that council give first reading to bylaw 20-7, fees bylaw amendment bylaw.
Thank you for that. We have a motion for first reading. I think we've lost Councillor Montgomery. Procedurally, is that even a word, Councillor Peterson?
It is so.
Oh, can we have a vote if Councillor Montgomery has left?
We just have to indicate that he's
back. All right, so we have a motion on the floor for first reading.
Councillor Bauer.
Councillor Bauer?
Aye.
Thank you. Councillor Cox?
Aye.
Mayor Corbeil?
Aye.
Councillor Montgomery.
Aye.
Councillor Peterson.
Aye.
Councillor Sobel.
Aye.
And I am an aye.
I move that council give second reading to bylaw number 20-07 fees bylaw amendment bylaw.
Thank you for that. We now have a motion for second reading. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing and hearing none. Councillor Bauer.
Aye.
Councillor Cox.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Corbio.
Aye.
Councillor
Aye.
Marie. Councillor Peterson.
Aye.
Councillor Sobel.
Aye.
Aye.
Your worship, I move the council give unanimous consent to third and final reading of bylaw number 20-07, fees amendment bylaw.
Thank you for that motion. Councillor Bauer.
Aye.
Councillor Cox.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Corbio.
Aye.
Councillor Montgomery.
Aye.
Councillor Peterson.
Aye.
Councillor Sobel.
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
Your worship,
Who was
I move-
that? Oh, sorry.
third and final reading bylaw number 20-07 fees bylaw amendment bylaw.
Thank you for that motion. Councillor Bauer.
Aye.
Councillor Cox.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Corbio.
Aye.
Aye.
Montgomery. Councillor Peterson.
Aye.
Councillor Sobel.
Aye.
And I am an aye. So that issue is dealt with. And now we move on to 12.2 bylaw 20-09 MSI interim funding bylaw. Ms. Peters, are you speaking to this or do you-
Your worship, I would like to give reading.
Councillor Cox, you're breaking up, and I
Your
think,
worship, first, please.
I think we have to wait just a touch till we hear from Ms. Peters, and I'll come
Okay.
back. But I think we're losing every second word from you somehow. Somehow you're breaking. Not sure what's. Mr. Chidi?
Thank you, Your Worship. Bylaw 20-09 provides for a first-time opportunity to utilize borrowing towards MSI. This aligns with the long-term financial plan of using grant funding for non-revenue producing assets. The use of borrowing and claiming the borrowing repayment costs within the MSI grant funding provides another tool in the toolbox to achieve a more robust financial discipline. The cumulative effect of this measure over 3 years is to utilize $2,436,000 of MSI grant revenue instead of having this funded by property taxes. The table in the report shows the remaining balance of the MSI allotments in each of the next 3 years of 2021, 22, and 23. This includes combining the projects contained within the existing 5-year capital plan and the additional principal payments amounts to be claimed. The total interest of bylaw 20-09 for a 5-year term at 2% interest is $140,100, and at 2.3%, $161,115, and we expect the interest rate to be closer to the 2% than the 2.3%. The principal payments on this additional borrowing would be paid over 5 years, and as such, the individual yearly amount would be $467,000 of the $812,000 that is contained within the report. The $812,000 combines the already in place long-term financing that has been completed in the past, both for Town Hall and for the Strathmore Commons. Those concludes my comments, Your Worship.
Thank you for your report and your comments, Mr. Teedy. Any questions for Mr. Teedy?
Your worship, council gives reading.
Okay, we have a motion from Councillor Peterson for first reading. Councillor Bauer,
Aye.
Councillor Cox.
Aye.
Seems so far away now, Councillor Cox. Deputy Mayor, you're in the ocean. Deputy Mayor Corbeil.
Aye.
Councillor Montgomery.
Aye.
Councillor Peterson.
Aye.
Councillor Sobel.
Aye.
And I am an aye.
I move that council give second reading to bylaw 20-09 MSI interim funding bylaw.
Thank you. We have a motion for second reading. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Councillor Bauer.
Aye.
Councillor Cox.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor.
Aye.
Councillor Councillor Peterson.
Aye.
Councillor Sobel.
Aye.
And I am an aye.
I move that council give unanimous consent for a third and final reading of bylaw 20-09 MSI interim funding bylaw.
Thank you for that motion, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Bauer.
Aye.
Councillor Cox.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Corbeil.
Aye.
Councillor Montgomery.
Aye.
Councillor Peterson.
Aye.
Councillor Sobel.
Aye.
I am an aye.
I will move the council. Are we on third reading right now then?
Mayor?
Yes. Third and final.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I will move the council give third and final reading to bylaw number 20-09 MSI interim funding bylaw.
Thank you for that motion. You all heard the motion. Councillor
Aye.
Councillor Cox.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Corbeil.
Aye.
Councillor Montgomery.
Aye.
Councillor Peterson.
Aye.
Councillor Sobel.
Aye.
I am an aye.
I would move that council authorize mayor and CAO to sign borrowing documentation to complete the borrowing.
Thank you for that motion. You've all heard the motion. Councillor Bauer.
Aye.
Councillor Cox.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Corbeil.
Aye.
Councillor Montgomery.
Aye.
Councillor Peterson.
Aye.
Councillor Sobel.
Aye.
And I am an aye.
Just a minute.
Your worship, I move that council direct administration to claim the principal repayment of this borrowing bylaw towards Alberta MSI grant revenue.
Thank you for that motion. All in favor? Sorry, Councillor Bauer.
Aye.
Cox.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Corbeil.
Aye.
Are you okay? Councillor Montgomery.
Your worship, would it be possible to just get Mr. Teedy to explain what the purpose of this last motion is?
It's a good idea for the public.
Sure. Sorry, Mr. Teedy.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
The purpose of the motion is, just as it said, that we claim the principal on the MSI grant revenue. In other words, we're shifting the cost from what would normally be a taxpayer-funded loan to a grant-funded project. So it's entirely on the back, as far as the principal part, on the back of grant funding and not on taxation.
Thank you. And I will vote aye.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson.
Aye.
Councillor Sobel.
Aye.
And I am an aye. And that completes that.
Your worship,
Yes, sir, Councillor Sobel.
may I make a comment on this last motion, please? So I really think that the public deserves more information in this regard, and I just want I guess, comment on the fact that that is forthcoming. I'm not exactly sure when it's forthcoming, but and I'm hoping administration can supply this. I know that you were taped and you're on video in regards to this matter, and that there's a three-page document that has been prepared and presumably will be approved by council. And I thought that would happen tonight. So I'm not sure what's happening in regards to that document, if it needs council approval or not. So I'm a little bit in the gray as to where we're going from here. But I do know that the intent is to provide full explanation, full detail as to why there's extra cost to our new building, and where some of the financial information as well. And it was my understanding that this would be done forthwith. So I'm hoping, just before we move on, to get a comment from the administration with some sense as to when this is occurring. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel, for bringing word for us.
Your Worship, I think I can answer that. It's Jen.
Okay.
So, Your Worship, we do have the mayor's video that he's done. That's ready to go. And I also believe that the report is ready to go. I think council wanted to see it one more time tonight in camera. So once we've done that, if council's good to go, then we are ready to post that first thing in the morning. Does that work for council?
Works for me anyway.
How does that impact as far as our time? We have about 14 minutes. That'll work?
Your Worship,
to make it work.
Once we go in camera, I will speak and I'll email around the document. I think we may have lost James to technical issues, so I'll send it around to council myself.
Okay, Mr. Thack, just been emailed.
You can tell Ryan I'll talk to you.
Ryan, if you could talk to James via email since his sound is not working.
Before going camera.
But yeah, we can have this out by the end of by 10:30.
It'll come to us before 10:30 for us to look at.
And receive his information. And then we can move that to the public agenda. I think that works, right, Jen?
Sorry, Ryan, I'm not too sure what you're saying.
I think we can, if we move it in camera, council can look at the report, assuming they're satisfied, come out of in camera, we'll formally present it to them and they accept it for information.
Yeah,
and
they can direct us to post it as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's my recommendation.
All right, so item 13, we have no urgent business. Item 14, are there any questions between councillors and or council statements? God bless you all. Item 15, administrative inquiries. Jennifer, do we have any to go through?
Your Worship, we've not received any.
Okay, so then I'm looking for a motion to go back in camera, and we might need a couple of minutes to switch to the other video system. Hopefully that'll work. It may not work.
Allowed to go longer than 10:30.
Pardon me?
Are we allowed to go longer than 10:30?
I'm going to defer to Jennifer.
Your Worship, I'm sorry, I'm not 100%, but I do believe that council can make a motion to relax the rules of their bylaw, of their procedure bylaw.
A 2/3 majority, right?
As I think this one has to be unanimous.
Oh, does it?
I think. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but.
So is any councillor comfortable in making a motion to relax the, I'm not sure how to word this, Jennifer.
I also move, whatever it is, relax our bylaws to allow extension of our meeting to 11 p.m.
Okay.
That sounds great.
Thanks, Councillor Sobel. Councillor Bauer?
Aye.
Councillor Cox?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Corbill?
Regrettably, aye.
Yeah. Councillor Montgomery, you don't want to discuss anything on that.
What was that, Terry?
I am sorry, I'm tired.
Okay, so you're an aye, Councillor Montgomery?
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Peterson?
Aye.
Councillor Sobel?
Aye.
I'm an aye. So I'm looking for a motion to go in camera.
I would move to go in camera, Your Worship.
Thank you. We have a motion to go in camera at 10:18 by Councillor Peterson. Councillor Bauer?
Aye.
Councillor Cox? Deputy Mayor Corbiel?
Aye.
Councillor Green? Councillor Peterson?
Aye.
Councillor Sobel?
Aye.
And I am an aye. So we are now going in camera at